not the type of bird to keep lists of my favorite things ever on hand, but I'm pretty sure that any top 5 games of all time list I made would have to have Sonic Adventure 2 in there somewhere. Battle specifically, of course. Imagine owning a Sega Dreamcast, but like, it's one of, if not the first game I can remember being truly obsessed with, truly dedicated to. From the first time playing it as a rental, which, is that even still a thing? All my late millennials, y'all remember game rentals from Blockbuster? Ah, good times. Anyways, I was only like 9 or 10 at the time, so of course I couldn't beat it in the weekend they had with it, and I was annoying enough about it that my parents knew they had to get it for me. Along with the official strategy guide, a prop I wish I had on hand to show y'all more of. This thing was my Bible as a kid, I tell ya. And frankly, that guide was probably the reason that Sonic Adventure 2 became such a big deal to me. Reading about all the extra missions, the difficult to achieve A ranks, the supposed secret level you could get by collecting every emblem, I had to know. I had to see it for myself. And thus began a years-long endeavor to collect all 180 emblems, a process that very likely turned me from kid who enjoys video games to kid who was good at video games. Or at least this one video game. Anyone who knows Sonic Adventure 2, like, knows that this was not easy. It's not the hardest game to beat, but goddamn does the game make you work for those A ranks. And you're a dumb kid who doesn't know what GameFAQs is yet, so you're spending a lot of time raising your Chow, too. Well, okay, I just did that anyways. I spent a lot of time in the Chow Garden as a kid, too. The Hero Garden in particular is probably legally my vacation home, even all these years later. But I did eventually do it, and it was something I could be proud of. A challenge I had overcome. One that sent me down the path of completion in many another game, because if I can triumph over this right bastion of a completion challenge, what other games could possibly stand in my way? Well, plenty, but I genuinely believe I would not be the same type of gamer, hell, probably not the same person I am today, if not for Sonic Adventure 2. Cause like, my very first online presence was on a Sonic fan forum at the wee age of 11. Yes, I was doing crimes even 20 years ago. I exist online because of Sonic, and Sonic Adventure 2 specifically. It is unquestionably one of my formative memories, media, that like one of those big floating islands from Inside Out, yeah. I have one of those inside my brain, and it looks like Mother Peckin' City Escape, baby! Woo!
Attention all units. Suspects.
Oh yeah!
Block all major roads and capture the suspect.
I love Sonic Adventure 2, which is to say, I love its levels. All of them. Well, most of them. But it'd be no fun if I didn't have at least one mortal enemy amongst a bunch, right? I know pretty much every level in this game like the back of my wing. From playing them all dozens of times as a kid, to coming back as an adult and re-100%ing the game in like 2 weeks tops because it really wasn't that hard, to playing the game in Archipelago and having to really learn all the nooks and crannies they hid away secrets in. I don't know if there's any set of levels in all of gaming that I have stronger opinions about than these 32. And yes, 32. I'm including Green Hill in this exercise for kicks. And because 32 is a nicer number. But yeah, that's the big long opening spiel as justification for why I'm the right person to be ranking these levels. I have history with them, I have respect for most of them, and I actually like the alternative styles of gameplay, unlike your average YouTuber. And if you're here looking for any kind of objective analysis or even consistent reasoning for placements, you're gonna hate this video, because this is all bias all the time, baby. I'm ranking every level from worst to best solely based on how much I like them. Nothing less, nothing more. Though, of course, we're starting with the ones I don't like, namely, number 32.
I'm picking up the signal from the arrow. Fox boy, wait for me!
And might as well throw the other one here too. Number 31.
The president must be over there! Let's go!
You know, I honestly considered if it was even worth counting these. Like, the kart stages are an entirely different game than the one I came here to play. Of course they're the worst ones in the game. I'm not much for racing games, or driving in games, or driving period. Don't own a car, don't want to. So these were never gonna do it for me. This isn't Sonic Adventure 2, this is Sonic Drift 4? 3 was an adventure one. But like, these are story levels. It'd feel weird to cut these but then include Green Hill, right? I'm honestly not entirely comfortable calling these the worst levels in the game, given the handful of utterly dreadful stages ahead of us, but the simple fact of the matter is that I would never choose to play these kart stages over any of them. Like, yeah, the kart control's fine. You basically don't have to do anything other than drive, drift, and boost, but it can be fun enough, and 2 to 3 minute bursts is a nice diversion from the rest of the game. And really, the track layouts aren't terrible. Route 101 in particular is honestly pretty solid. No pits or holes in the wall to fall off of, a few fun turns in tight spaces. It's a little strange that there's some elements that show up in the kart racing minigame that aren't present in either track here, but I don't mind Route 101. Route 280 on the other hand, look, I get that this is supposed to be the harder level. Adding more danger makes sense in a vacuum, but the thing is, this is a 3+ minute level with no checkpoints. Falling sends you all the way back to the start without exception. It's not like the level isn't already full full of more tough turns and tighter corridors than Route 101, that some of those turns can just straight up kill you is just too much. It's not the hardest thing in the world, sure, but it's nowhere near as chill to play as Route 101. And then there's the missions, which, yes, do play a factor into how I feel about every level. I've spent so much time playing these extra missions that there's no way they wouldn't have shaped my opinion in some way or another. And they're what turned these okay cart levels into the worst levels in the game. Missions 3 and especially 4. Don't hit cars and don't hit walls. Remember what I said about how adding holes to Route 280 ruined the fun? That's the entire level now. One wrong move and it's back to the start with you. And you still gotta go fast, you're on a time limit, and you need those A ranks too. Full disclosure, these were the last missions I A ranked in the game as a kid, with Route 280's Mission 4 specifically being the very last one for me out of all 155. I have held a lifelong grudge against these missions, and it's one I'm never gonna let go of till the day I die. That's really what makes these two otherwise perfectly serviceable if unexciting cart levels into my two least favorite in the game. But it's really not fair either, given how different they are from everything else. If we're talking what the true worst proper level in the game is, well, number 30. I want to preface by saying that I actually like the hunting stages in Sonic Adventure 2, way more than in 1. Maybe because I played them first, but I've never been all that bothered by the one at a time radar. Having all 3 emerald shards pinging all the time can be overwhelming and distracting, and just blindly stumbling upon a shard before your radar starts tracking it is really exciting. It's probably not the better option between the two, all things considered, but I don't mind it. And the hint system in 2 is just a lot cooler than hint orb flies in the direction of the shard from 1. Hints that get progressively more helpful, so what starts as needing 2 or 3 hints to find a shard turns into just the first one once you learn the level well enough, because yes, like all Sonic games, these levels are meant to be replayed, learned, mastered. Yes, it's gonna take a lot longer your first time through because you don't know the lay of the land. That's by design. Unironically a skill issue if you have a problem with that. And I just generally find exploring 3D spaces fun, especially if the mobility Knuckles and Rouge are afforded. Fast run speed, fast glide speed, fast dive speed, the ability to climb damn near any wall. Hell, even being able to swim for as little as it crops up. Movement is fun. Treasure hunting is fun. I'd unironically play an entire game made up of treasure hunting stages. What I'm trying to say is, it'd take a lot to make me actively despise one of these stages. And yet, well...
Detector readings are reversed. Be very careful.
One piece of Sonic Adventure 2 trivia that's always stuck with me from the moment I heard it is that originally the only playable characters were Sonic, Knuckles, and Eggman. It's never been confirmed by the devs themselves, but it's like so obviously true, right? Spoilers for the rest of this list, I guess, but broadly, Sonic levels are better than Shadow levels, Eggman levels are better than Tails levels, and Knuckles levels are better than Rouge levels. And it's because a lot of the latter feel like inferior clones or alterations of the former. And that's most obvious with Rouge, whose stages are Dry Lagoon, which is almost beat for beat identical to Wild Canyon, Egg Quarters, which is just Death Chamber chopped in half, Security Hall, which is a room from Eggman's Iron Gate with states slapped onto the walls, bet you didn't know that one, and Route 280, which is, again, a kart racing minigame, not even a real level. And Mad Space is obviously just Meteor Herd, except not entirely. The tragedy of Mad Space is that it's so much more high effort than any of Rouge's other stages. Hell, it's more high effort than Meteor Herd itself. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that Mad Space was the original Knuckles level, and they swapped it for Meteor Herd when they realized just how much harder Mad Space was, and how, bad it was, because Mad Space just does not work on any level. The obvious problem is the gravity mechanics on 2 of the 3 major planetoids, which are hot garbage. It's been over 20 years, and I still don't really understand how the direction of my control stick correlates to the direction Rouge moves on anything below the top third of either of these planets. It's just unfreaking controllable. Mario Galaxy, this is not. It's a bad gimmick they probably would have dunked in the trash if not for needing a treasure hunting stage in space for Rouge as well. But like, the rest of the level is also not good. The giant ring of floating platforms over the void, that's just a nightmare to try and find your place in. The starting platform and its 3 rockets that I still can't tell apart at a glance. The fact that there's so much empty space, you practically have to already know where a shard is to even be able to find it. Like, maybe it's just the scale of the level messing with me, but I swear the radar is weaker in this level than in any other level, even Meteor Herd. It's the one level where I really want that all 3 at once radar, yeah. The only salvageable parts of the level are the top planetoid and the underhang at the very top, the latter of which is already in Meteor Herd, so... And for as cool as the hint system generally is, yeah, of course they muck it up here too. I actually don't mind the opposite day hints that much, cause they're funny, but the backwards hints are, so, like, why is the game encouraging you to pause the action just to read the hints? What does this add to the game? It's not like the first hint is ever that useful anyways. The missions are also pretty much all a mess too. The level's huge, yet it's really stingy on rings, with most of the capsules being in the bottom ring, the green planetoid, or at the very top, and that's a lot of space to try and cover in a short amount of time. The Lost Chow is one one of the blandest in the game, almost identical to Meteor Herds, as is the 4:30 time limit on Mission 4, which is doable, but god can it get tight. And Mission 5 is, well, the Mission 5s in general are all a bit silly, because the pieces are always in the same place, but all the ones here are just annoying enough to bug me. Flying to the bottom of the crater planetoid, sure, whatever. Fighting the controls to get to the bottom of the round planetoid, ew. Needing to pull off a spiral kick, awkward at the best of times and rarely ever asked of the player. In the middle of 2 rotating spike balls to grab the last shard, vile. Really, the only thing Mad Space has going for it is its music. I do appreciate me some tasty 7/8 time signatures, but it's not even Rouge's best stage theme, and it's certainly not enough to excuse all the problems the stage has. Mad Space, more like bad space, haha, got him. Thankfully, there's no other hunting stage quite as bad as this one, but, well, that doesn't mean I don't have a bone to pick with any of the others. Number 29.
This is Rouge. I've located Eggman's base and will proceed to enter it now.
I know I just threw Shaded Headquarters for literally just being half of Death Chamber, but honestly, in a lot of ways, it's better. The level isn't so large that you can get lost in it, and hell, given the whole thing's just a giant loop of narrow corridors, you can realistically find all 3 keys without even looking at the hint monitors. Maybe it doesn't make it the most engaging hunting stage, but I appreciate the variety of level structures, and the roaming beetle is a pretty neat little gimmick. Definitely the kind of thing that's really scary when you're a kid playing this game for the first time, and suddenly the screen starts flashing red before you get shot with a bunch of lasers, until you eventually realize that, like, it's honestly not that dangerous, and you can pretty much just ignore it unless you're going for the 100 rings mission, which is thankfully fairly painless here anyways. Just follow the loop in the same direction as the beetle, and you'll probably only see it once or twice per mission. No big deal, really. 8 quarters is also where Rouge gets the pick nails, and they're hidden in a pretty fun way. Not just right in front of the required path like so many of the other mandatory power-ups are. You have to go looking for them, but you do need them to finish the stage, so go, explore. It's what the hunting levels are all about. Admittedly, the Lost Chow mission here is a little silly. The Mystic Melody pedestal's not hidden at all, but the Chow's stuck under a big weight that you need to disable by going to another room and breaking a ton of boxes to try and find the one that the switch is under. A guessing game, or a memory game if you're trying to speedrun it. And the 3 minutes you're given for the 4th mission, pretty reasonable. Not too lenient, but not that strict either. And at this point, you're probably thinking, Crow, this level is right near the bottom of the list. Why are you being so weirdly positive towards it? Like, repeated level design aside, it sounds like it's a pretty solid stage, right? Well, yeah, it is. A solidly B tier level. Except for that fucking 5th mission. So, picture this. You boot up Egg Quarter's 5th mission for the first time, expecting a fairly normal, if slightly spicy affair like most other treasure hunting 5th missions are, and you come across the first key in a cage. Well, usually you use missiles to break these, but, there isn't a missile anywhere around here. And then you get a giant bomb thrown at you by a monkey perched on a pipe above you, and it blows up in your face and breaks the cage, allowing you to collect the key. That's kinda cute, I guess, if a little bit annoying. Then you find where the 2nd key is hidden, and it's behind more cages. And it starts to dawn on you that someone on the dev team thought they really cooked, and that this is really gonna suck. Cause yeah, all 3 keys are basically the same. Get monkey to throw bomb to blow up cage to get the key. But the monkeys are just really bad at their jobs. It takes so long to bait one of them into throwing a bomb. Sometimes they just won't, and sometimes they do, but because the pickup range is so tiny, you have to get dangerously close to the bomb to pick it up. Otherwise, you're gonna accidentally kick it, explode it, and destroy the monkey near you, potentially rendering the stage outright unwinnable. Oh, and the monkey with the big bomb, sometimes it just doesn't throw the bomb for no reason, and it explodes in its hands and kills it, and then you just have to restart. Who thought this was a good idea? Even if it worked properly, which it doesn't, it's not like fun waiting around to manipulate enemy AI and slowly inching up to a bomb on a fairly short time limit, mind you. To pick it up and carry it somewhere else is just not compelling gameplay. And don't even get me started on the 3rd key, where you have to not only figure out that you need the treasure scope to find a hidden spring, but then to toggle it in advance of picking up the bomb, because you can't while holding it. It's a puzzle, I get that, but it's just adding another layer of frustration on top of an already annoying task. Full stop, I think this is the worst mission in the game. Not the hardest, not the most time consuming, usually, but just the one I detest the most because it's just fundamentally malformed and completely unenjoyable from a gameplay level. And luck-based. Sometimes the game just says no and there's nothing you can do about it. It's the only real thorn in my side with Egg Quarters, but by God, that's a big thorn. One that's been causing me pain for 2 goddamn decades now. Number 28. I feel like the mech stages are misunderstood. No, I know they're misunderstood. Like, okay, for one, y'all, Tails was not originally gonna be in the game. Sticking him in a mech, a style of gameplay they'd already already developed was about the best they could do with the limited time they had. It's a miracle we got the game in as good a state as we did. Stop talking like you know how game development works, Jesus Christ. But like, even beyond that, like with the hunting stages, I feel like the mech gameplay is unfairly maligned just because it's not certified hedgehog gameplay. The mechs don't move as fast, but they're not slow either, and anyways, if you're playing the mech stages just blindly running forward as fast as you can, you're missing the entire point. You're supposed to play a little more tactical, stop for a moment to gun down some robots in your way, figure out the best ways to rack up combos. It's not like you aren't doing anything when you aren't moving. Play right and you can get just as lost in the flow of gameplay as with the other playstyles. Like, am I gonna say the mech gameplay is as fun as the speeder hunting characters? No, but I still have plenty of fun with it all the same. I'm not sure there's a bigger shot of dopamine anywhere in the game than racking up that 11 target combo and being rewarded with a big Gale perfect and 2,000 points. Like, ooh, that's the good stuff, baby. And like how Mad Space is the only hunting stage I really dislike, there's really only one mech level I think just plain sucks. On paper, Mission Street sounds like it could work. It's a mech stage just made out of speed stage geometry, namely that of City Escape and especially, hell, mostly Radical Highway. The twisty roads, the walls you have to platform up, the more open city spaces at the start and end that host a higher density of robots to gun down, it's an idea, but when you actually, you know, play it, you kind of start to understand why no other mech stage is designed this way. There's a reason every other mech stage is nothing but blocky, flat terrain, cause like, turns out the mech just isn't designed to run up slopes at all. Just completely kills your speed. It feels goddamn terrible and there's nothing you can do about it. And it turns out that platforming up the side of a wall isn't all that fun when it mostly just involves waiting on slow cycles that you, again, can't do anything about either. Oh, and having bombs constantly raining down you doesn't help either. They take just long enough to come down that even if you're taking your time, you still might get hit, but too fast to ever run straight past either. And the mech's too slow to dodge on reflex like a hedgehog might be able to, and the mech's hitbox is huge, so it's incredibly easy to get grazed by an explosion. You basically have to memorize where all the bomb drops are going to be if you want to both avoid them and keep moving at the same time. Mission Street really is just a lot of small annoyances that add up to a bad time. The weight you have to ride up that'll always spawn at just the right time to make you wait on it unless you made it to the upper path, the painfully slow sets of up and down platforms, the bridge full of pillars in your way that you have to run around as you're shooting them, but they fall in such unintuitive directions that it's easy to bonk into them, the awkward, barely feels like it should work platforming on top of a few said fallen pillars, the long sloped loop upwards, the onslaught of enemies and falling bridges at the end. I can't point to a single part of the level I find particularly pleasant. It's also like the poster child for how ill-fitting the 100 ring missions are for the mechs, a style of gameplay that's expected to both take more damage and collect less rings than the other two. There aren't even 100 rings in the stage, period. It's only by the grace of checkpoint ring bonuses that you can even complete the mission in a single cycle, and even then, the earliest you can finish the mission is right near the end anyways. And may I remind you that this is a level of bombs constantly raining down on you from above. The other missions aren't really worth commenting on. Like, yeah, this is the first in a trend of putting the Lost Chow a bit too deep into linear stages. The time limit missions in mech stages are pretty much all great, really emphasizing the flow between moving and shooting the mech gameplay has to offer, and how mech mission 5s are usually just some combination of more enemies and harder platforming, and Mission Streets is a fairly competent, if unremarkable, example of that. Really, unless any of these missions do something particularly interesting in future levels, I probably won't even bring them up past this point. Weirdly enough, the biggest saving grace of the stage for me is actually its music. One of, if not my favorite of Tales' stage themes. Not that there's all that much competition, but it's the one that feels most Talesy, you know? Upbeat and bright in the same way he is. Kinda station squarey too, which, I mean, yeah, it's a city stage, it fits. And like, yeah, I've ragged on this level a lot, but that's only because I think it's bad as a mech stage. There's certainly still the inherent fun of the mech gameplay to be had here. It's not as bland as the card stages, not as miserable as Mad Space, and not as utterly infuriating as Egg Quarter's last mission. Frankly, it's the last level left where my thoughts on it are more negative than positive. Again, I like most of the levels in this game, just not these last few. That's all. On to the positive part of the list. Number 27. From one stage 7 to another, eh? Weapons bed is fine. Yeah, okay, maybe positive was the wrong word because this is a stage I feel the most neutral about, or rather the stage I feel the least about in general. Like, you go girl, give us nothing. It's just 3 big ships bridged together by some fairly basic platforming with gratuitous overuse of easily the most annoying gun robot throughout. And like, yeah, I guess it's kind of fun to rack up huge combos on the deactivated robots, but like in a mindless way. I didn't earn those perfects, you gave them to me. It feels feels cheap. It's like the Skinner box of levels. Like, woohoo, look at you getting 2,000 points, please keep playing our game. And it's kinda neat that Eggman runs faster while on the ships, which is only compensation for how big the ships are and how tedious they'd be to run across otherwise, so... Oh, and okay, so literally every other stage in the game either ends with some big set piece or at least a big room with some degree of spectacle to it. Even Mission Street, to its credit, but Weapons Bed, it just stops at a random platform over the ocean. Like, huh? Could have easily just put the gold ring at the end of the third big ship and not lost anything meaningful. Presentation-wise, it's also the least exciting level in the game. Literally nothing but grays and blues and a scattering of greens. Just really boring to look at and to listen to. Probably also my least favorite stage theme in the game. Like, it's fine, just doesn't do much for me. And yeah, I guess it's cool that it's all framed as guns, weapons, transportation ships with the planes and robots and all. There's a theme here, I just don't find it interesting. Mission-wise, it's nothing remarkable. Another right at the end of Lost Chow, a pretty strict time limit that actually makes you rush your big combos a little, so good on that. And a both somewhat funny and annoying last mission that replaces a lot of the inactive robots with more gun hogs. Like, oh my god, there's so many of them that just pop out at you. But it's not particularly special in that regards as far as last missions go. I don't know, like, there's nothing I dislike about Weapons Bed, but not really anything I like about it either. It is completely average, the purest 5 out of 10, the bottom of C tier. It just feels unusually unremarkable for an Eggman stage, which we won't be seeing another of for a good long while. Number 26. Next up is actually our first speed stage, which might be surprising until I tell you it's just Green Hill. I don't particularly feel the need to do my usual, the speed stages are good actually spiel here, in part because, well, they're the one part of the game everyone seems to like, and also, like, it's Green Hill. This doesn't even really count as a stage. It's a reward for pushing through one of, if not the most excruciating completion challenges of its era. An entirely new stage, and a throwback to Sonic's origins in celebration of his 10th anniversary. Like, they didn't have to do that, but they did. If this game came out 10 years later, the best you get for all your hard work is an achievement and maybe, like, a new character skin or something. And like, yeah, it's not a particularly substantive stage, it's just straight up a 3D recreation of Green Hill Act 1, a level that's, you know, not particularly long, but the attention to detail is charming, the retro aesthetics and sound effects are a nice touch, and it's so neat, even if it's not, you know, all that exciting to play. Cause like, yeah, it turns out a level not designed around Sonic Adventure 2's controls is not particularly well suited for them. It's all weird strips of blocky land, awkward corners that don't play well with the camera, and skipping huge chunks of the level is pitifully easy. Also, getting an A rank here is like unusually stingy. You really have to go out of your way to scrounge up points and take things a lot slower than you otherwise would, unlike any other speed stage in the game. It's not like required to get an A rank here, there's literally no reward for it, but like, it just feels nice, you know? I don't know, it's fun, it's cute, it's just like, judging it as a stage is kind of silly, you know? But that's the point of this video, so it's alright, yeah. And I'm gonna double up again and do these next two together, cause I have pretty much the same thoughts on both of them. Number 25. Number 24. Yeah, 2 of the 3 remaining Tails levels. As a fox myself, I must deeply apologize to the Volpine community for putting most of Tails' levels so low, but these 2 really exemplify why that's the case. They're fairly competent, baseline enjoyable mech levels that just so happen to also feel like inferior versions of their respective Eggman levels. There's nothing particularly wrong with either of them, and I like them fine enough for what they are, but they just don't have the sauce that Ion Gate or Sand Ocean have, at least for me. Prison Lane does its job as a mech tutorial stage pretty well. Lots of gates blocking your way that you need to destroy specific gun robots to get past, sometimes even shooting through them, and it forces you to actually engage with the shooty part of the runny shooty gameplay loop. And kicking off Tails as part of the story with a friggin' jailbreak is honestly a pretty bold and kind of funny move. Yeah, Fox is destroying the prison industrial complex, woo! And Hidden Base is a pretty solid mid to late game mech stage. Definitely ramps up the difficulty of the platforming compared to his last 2 stages, and the enemies are placed in a lot more precarious ways, where usually their real goal is to knock you off into the deadly quicksand below. It's also one of the few mech stages that almost never makes you wait, and subsequently ends up being one of the shorter ones if you know what you're doing. In fact, I actually used to be a lot lower on Hidden Base until I started this project. I originally had it just above Mission Street because I remembered it being kinda annoying, but revisiting it again for the first time in a while, liked it a lot more than I remembered. I think it's just because there's higher potential here for small shortcuts than in most other mech stages. You can skip some walls or those metal drums you have to blow up if you know what you're doing, and while yes, it's a bit goofy that there's walls here at all, for most of them, if you know they're coming, you can blast through them ahead of time without even needing to slow down. It's a pretty satisfying level to blaze through. Prison Lane doesn't have as much in the way of little tricks like that, but it's got a lot more potential for racking up combos both big and small. And like, yeah, its mandatory elevator ride that you can't skip like the ones in Iron Gate since this one is going up is a bit of a pace breaker, but it's not long enough to really bother me either. The gates on this one can also make the pacing a little janky, but it's as much a shooting gallery as it is a platforming stage, and some of the more sneakily hidden robots really encourage you to poke around. There's not really that much to say on the mission front for either of these stages. Hidden Base's 100 ring mission has some fun checkpoint ring tricks you can use to finish it a lot earlier than I used to think you could, but on the flip side, its mission 4 time limit is comically high, barely even matters. Prison Lane has a solid mid-level Lost Chow, and its last mission shows a lot more fangs than I'd expect from the tutorial stage, even as a hard mode, but it's not that tough either. And both have some of the more annoyingly hidden power-ups. For both of them, you need to come back with the bazooka to break some metal crates, and while Hidden Base's Mystic Melody is in the middle of the stage, Prison Lane's Laser Blaster is actually past the end. A lot of effort for the least useful of all his power-ups. And the catch of both of these stages is that, again, they're just not as cool as their Eggman counterparts. Prison Lane is drab grays as far as the eye can see, which it's a jail, so fair, and Hidden Base uses the same pyramid aesthetic that almost every other character gets some time with, though it's colorful enough that I don't mind seeing it so often, really. Both lack for the more moodier atmospheric lighting of Eggman stages, though, and I don't think either is as fun to romp through, but again, I do like them both. Just, we're already approaching the part of the list where the competition starts to get stiff, y'all. Number 23. I think Death Chamber starts a part of this ranking where some objectively weaker levels are just carried by vibes. Like, is this stage better designed or more fun to play than the last few on the list? No, not really, but also, have you considered that sax?
Sonic, what are you doing here? I heard you on a quest for the Master Emerald. You know me and you don't get along.
And just, like, the whole level feels unusually somber and oppressive. Knuckles is disturbing and ancient too, and it sure as hell feels like it. Or, well, Eggman disturbed it first, but that ain't gonna stop the ghost from being angry with the Echidna anyways. And the big central room with the giant mechanism has always felt mysterious. What is it doing? Why did Eggman build it? We may never know. This is all to pave over the fact that, as a hunting stage, Death Chamber has problems. For one, it's just too big. Too big for how confined it is. There's no easy way to navigate through the entire level, and it's gonna take too long to check everywhere anyway, so hints become more valuable than ever. And some of the spaces are non-contiguous, so even the radar stops being useful for some key locations. I think the devs knew this level was a bit too hard because it's got the most lenient aim rank requirements of any hunting stage, all capping out at a measly 12,000 points. And it's got the longest mission 4 time limit too. Which, speaking of, Bradley, Knuckles may have my favorite missions in the entire game out of any character. Stuff like the 100 rings and Lost Chow missions already tend to play better with the more explorative hunting gameplay, but he also gets some of the best tuned time limits and some of the most devious hard mode shard locations too. Please ignore that there are keys in this level. In fact, I have something to say about most of his missions here. The 100 rings mission, for one, is the first of a few where the optimal way to beat it is to, get hit. So, like, getting hit in a hunting stage's 100 ring mission spawns a back ring that'll reset the entire stage safe via ring count, and there's a ton of rings in the big central area, so it's just easier and faster than trying to scrounge up rings all over the stage. It rewards you for playing smart, and maybe a little cheesy. The Lost Chow's also one of my favorites. Again, primarily for the vibes. A secret underwater fourth wing of the tomb, both really cool and kinda scary, especially if you somehow don't have the air necklace by this point. And it's admittedly a bit lame that 2 of the 3 keys in hard mode are in the same area, with the third being off in its own little puzzle room, but in isolation I think they're all pretty cool locations, so And yeah, having Death Chamber this high, which still in the bottom 10 mind you, is probably one of my least justifiable takes in this video, but I don't know, I just think it's neat. Or maybe it's just that sax carrying it. Yeah, that's probably it. I think that's worth a good 5 spot just by itself. Number 22. Okay, now it's time for our first real speed stage, and it's probably not the one you expect.
Shadow, they're in that blue plane. Spotted at 11 o'clock.
Or maybe it was, I don't know, I don't know you. And to be clear, we're not dealing with least goods here rather than worse, because like, the baseline Hedgehog gameplay in Sonic Adventure 2 is so strong you'd have to go out of your way to make a bad level out of it. Skyrail isn't a bad stage, and it's got all the strengths every other speed stage in the game does. Fast pace, of course, tons of style and spectacle, and boundless potential for doing it better than the last time. But Skyrail's also in a bit of an unfortunate place where, like, ever notice how the level's music sounds way more like Sonic style than Shadow's? Yeah, well, Well, there's a reason for that. Odds are it was originally going to be somewhere in that excruciatingly long gap between Sonic stages in the middle of the hero story, but got pushed off to Shadow late in development because he needed more stages and Sonic already had his own rail-focused level anyways. The problem being that, Shadow doesn't get the bounce bracelet, the tool that makes landing on rails way easier and thus way more fun. Not that Sonic would have had it by that point either, but I digress. Which isn't to say it ruins the level or anything. Rail grinding is fun, more engaging in this game than in any future Sonic game since you actually have to do things, and rail switching works way better than most people give it credit for. It's not perfect, but it works more than well enough for me to trust it during the shenanigans the 100 ring and hard mode missions here want you to do. And it has one of the biggest, most obvious shortcuts of any of the speed stages. So obvious even a kid could find it, until that same kid realized they were robbing themselves of a lot of points by doing so. Cause it's not like there's a lot of other opportunities to earn points given, you know, let's just admit it, this stage is too goddamn short. It's barely longer than Green Hill, and even the next shortest stage, Metal Harbor, feels a lot more substantive than this, especially since half the level is literally on rails. It's definitely the speed stage that feels most unfinished, for lack of a better term, even more so than the other Shadow stages, which, given it's all but confirmed to be a Sonic hand-me-down, you'd think it should have been the most developed, right? Also, can I vent for just a second about these propeller springs? Like, maybe this is just 10-year-old me's skill issue, but I could not for the life of me figure these things out. Usually you're supposed to jump on springs, right? I learned that from 2D Sonics, so why doesn't that work here? Is the game broken? And then even when you know what to do, I don't trust them. Far too often I homing attack at the wrong time, or my homing attack just abruptly picks another target and I end up plummeting to my doom because of it. Way more unreliable than the rail switching. And Skyrail has probably the meanest gold beetle in the game too. Pro tip, you gotta jump without holding the stick to get a proper jump off a rail, and even once you do, you still gotta actually get to the beetle in time, otherwise you're probably just gonna miss it and fall into the void. It's evil, but the stage is short enough that I find it more funny than annoying, honestly. I'm kinda shocked I had this much to say about Sky Rail, the weakest proper speed stage in Sonic Adventure 2, and also one of the best speed stages in Sonic Frontiers, which honestly just makes me sad. I miss this kind of Sonic game. That's a rant for another time though. We've got way too many other stages to get through here. On to the next level. Number 21. Final Chase is mostly up this high because of how cool it is, since, let's not bury the lead, you know exactly why this level is as low as it is. The glorious sequel to the Carnival Night Barrel of Doom, the Final Chase gravity drums of something slightly less Doom-shaped. And if you allow me to play devil's advocate for a second, well, at least they're not the Mad Space Planetoids. Like, they generally work, controlling on them at least makes sense, and their gravity field is as generous as it needs to be. Yes, we've all had that experience of jumping just out of range at the wrong time and plummeting through our deaths, but like, they're more consistent than, you know, the goddamn propeller springs, ahem, and more engaging. Are they fun to interact with? Well, not particularly. Most gameplay around them either involves holding a direction, waiting, or jumping and praying to God, but at the very least, I get what they were going for. And frankly, for the most part, they barely even matter anyways. Final Chase is like the most classic Sonic-y level in the game. There's so many high path, low path spots throughout the level, and your reward for taking the high path is pretty much always not having to deal with gravity drum jank. Is it a good thing that the game encourages you not to interact with its primary gimmick? Not particularly, but you do at least have to earn the right to ignore them. The only really egregious section of the level is the long vertical climb in the middle, and even then, it's really only mediocre by comparison. It's also kind of funny how willing the game is to troll you here. The tempting rail full of rings that causes you to miss a checkpoint if you take it. The light dash trail trying to send you to the wrong rail and force you onto the lower path. That bounce off an artificial chaos the game makes you do towards the end of the level that's absolutely terrifying each and every time. Okay, that last one's more just plain evil rather than a little bit of trolling, but you can tell the level designers were having fun with this one. And I'm having fun playing it too, no less for, again, how damn cool it is. I think it's also the first level here that's really elevated by its context in the story, and it certainly won't be the last. Right after seeing the presumed death of Sonic Theodore Hedgehog in the cutscene prior, which if you're a small child who wasn't good enough to beat Crazy Gadget yet, was your first exposure to that scene and had you legitimately believing Sonic might be dead, which Shadow himself has no reason not to believe, and immediately after Rouge questions Shadow's own sense of self, he's abruptly sent on a mad chase below the Arc to catch up with some mysterious figure trying to sabotage the Eclipse Cannon, putting his entire plan in jeopardy. Shadow isn't doing this for Eggman, he's doing this for himself, and to assert himself as the ultimate life form, as the stage's soundtrack is so desperately trying to reaffirm. Whereas Final Rush feels like a chaotic scramble to save the world, Final Chase is practically a playable anxiety attack. And it's just so sick. Like, even just to look at. The colorful and yet alien aesthetics of the Arc's underside is probably my favorite in the entire game. The sound design is blaring and overstimulating in a way that actually serves the level and its identity, and the stage's music is fantastic, both as a song and as a distillation of who Shadow is. And the stage is wonderfully fast-paced in a way that the gravity gimmick rarely ever intrudes on. Plus, like, it's the only one of Shadow's stages that really makes you try, makes you do actual platforming, and presents any real degree of challenge. It's a good final test of everything you've learned. The missions admittedly do let this one down a bit. This might be the most egregious lost child location in the entire game, right before the end of one of the game's longest stages, which, yeah, it's also got the longest time limit of any speed stage, even though I genuinely do not see how it could take you that long to beat, even taking your time to rack up points. The real challenge is just getting to the end without dying, which is more than scary enough. Level is hard, yo. I do absolutely understand how Final Chase gets a bad rap. It's one of the lowest ranked speed stages here for a reason, after all, but also, like, again, sorry that the level challenged you, made you try more than your average boost to win modern Sonic stage. Honing your skills and improving your stages that originally gave you a hard time is my favorite thing about this game, and on that front, Final Chase is easily the most rewarding of all of Shadow's stages. Number 20. And of course, the other one too. Number 19.
This is
Okay, I swear this is the last time I'm gonna be doubling up, but like, with these two stages, it's damn near impossible not to. When two levels have near identical layouts and thus near identical appeal, like, what else am I supposed to do but rank them together? And in a lot of ways, these stages are like the platonic ideal of what a treasure hunting stage should be. Small enough that exploring them isn't a chore, but just big enough that you do need to, like, actually explore them. And they're both separated into 4 distinct areas: the starting box-like area, the central hub area, and 2 alcoves on either side. They're spaces that are easy to learn the layout of, and having a hub area timed the 3 branches together organically teaches you that you may need to re-explore areas you'd already checked for new emerald shards. Plus, your tools are fairly limited this early in the game, so most of the emerald shards are out in the open, or at most hidden in bots or pots. It significantly increases your chances of finding a shard early, teaching you that you can still find shards even if your radar isn't picking them up yet, and it, again, just feels good. The main downside to these levels being so small is that, compared to the bigger, more intricate hunting stages, they can feel a bit shallow. Like, every mission in either of these levels can reasonably be cleared in under a minute, which that ain't much bang for your buck, you know? But they both benefit from the biggest strength of the hunting stages: replayability. Speed stages and mech stages are plenty replayable too, but they're also going to be exactly the same every time you play them. Hunting stages, though, there's so many potential emerald shard locations and so many possible combinations of those locations that the odds you're ever going to get the same set twice is astronomically low. Hell, you can play the level a dozen times and not see the same location twice. It keeps you on your toes, makes you think more than the other styles of gameplay, remains engaging the longest. That's why I'd love to see the series revisit this style of gameplay. Think about how cool emerald hunting could be and the kind of spaces games can make nowadays. I've sort of gone off topic of the levels themselves, but frankly, there's not really that much to say because they're mostly just the joy of emerald hunting distilled to its purest essence. And there's not exactly a lot differentiating the two either. Like, Wild Canyon has the more fun method of traversal between its 2 main areas, Dry Lagoon has the more compelling aesthetic, and it has that little underwater tunnel you have to ride a turtle through, which, imagine getting a shard in here your first time playing the game. How's a kid gonna figure this out? Harder than any of the hard mode shards for my money. Which, yeah, Wild Canyon definitely has the more compelling hard mode of the two, and I'd say I slightly prefer its 100 ring mission as well, and Dry Lagoon's mission 4 also has a pointlessly long time limit, longer than 8 quarters for some reason. Not that it really matters of how short the stage can be, but I also just tend to prefer Knuckles' stage music over Rouge's too. Like, there's a lot of small reasons I prefer Wild Canyon over Dry Lagoon, but they're all minute differences in the grand scheme of things, and I like both stages a lot regardless. But I'm gonna ask Rouge not to sit down just yet, cause, number 18.
No more time to waste. Set the timer for 15 minutes. Let's go, Rouge.
5 minutes should be plenty. Here I go.
Rouge really got a raw deal in this game. The worst stage, period, the worst hunting stage, and the worst mission in the game. And one of her only 2 good stages is the carbon copy of one of Knuckles' levels. Security Hall is really the only good thing she has to herself, but hey, that is a pretty damn good thing. And Security Hall holds a place in my memories as the first, like, true Wall of the Dark story when I was a kid. 5 minutes? That's so little time. How am I supposed to find 3 Chaos Emeralds in 5 minutes? I feel like the first time I beat this level, it must have been by the skin of my beak, but overcoming the challenge and being rewarded with the rest of the Dark story God, that felt good, I tell ya. Of course, the joke is that once I got better at the game, finishing Security Hall in under 5 minutes became trivial. Hell, even its 4th mission time limit is fairly generous for how open and easy to navigate the level is. Screw having 4 distinct areas, this level only needed 2 to feel complete. I mean, you could argue that either each of its wings or each of its floors counts as a distinct area, but at the end of the day, the level is a big open box to fly around in with a smaller but still decently sized box on top. And yeah, I suppose the safe gimmick can be a little annoying, being so close yet so far to an emerald locked in a safe you can't yet open, but on the flip side, it's not uncommon to go up and flick a safe switch only to find a free emerald up top anyways, and if you know how to get to the top of the level fast, it doesn't even really take all that long to do either. It's not the best gimmick, but it's not really a bad one. Plus, it plays in so well with the theme of the stage, being essentially a bank robbery, Rouge's bread and butter. It's really the only time in the game where it feels like she's the master thief she purports to be. So hyper-focused on jewels, 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 that she doesn't even think for a second to grab any of the cash flying around the room. Or maybe she just doesn't have the time, cause she is on the clock here, and the up-tempo, utterly thrilling stage music makes sure you don't forget that. A rollicking good bit of espionage. It's far and away her best tune. It's also got one of the most amusing lost shouts, or at least I think it's funny, namely because it's trivial to collect without even needing Mystic Melody. I'm sure there's a more intended way to collect it, but I've long forgotten what that is. My way's more fun anyways. It's also got both one of the more involved hard mode emerald locations and one of the more involved power-up locations. You need both the Iron Boots and Mystic Melody for the latter, and the former requires 3 different power-ups. Iron Boots and Treasure Scope to hit a switch, and Pick Nails to unlock the safe below the weight set switch deactivates, which make sure you didn't forget to hit the red safe switch when getting the second emerald. I think I'm always going to admire Security Hall as a really effective choke point that forces you to get at least competent treasure hunting to clear, but it's also just a good hunting stage period, both mechanically and thematically. Couldn't really ask it to do more than it does. Mostly, I'm just glad Rouge got at least one big win of her own. Shout out women, huge dub for feminism right here. Number 17.
Hurry and get back here right now before the island blows up with you on it!
Blows up?
So, is calling this Sonic's worst speed stage a hot take? Relatively worst, of course, given that it's, you know, better than another character's best level, but I don't know. Green Forest is kind of just the most baseline good speed stage that doesn't really have anything particularly remarkable about it. I think most of the appeal of the stage is its framing in the story. A frantic rock banger setting the stage for Sonic's mad rush to escape the island before it blows up on an incredibly generous time limit for such a relatively short stage. And when I tell y'all this was another wall for me as a kid, though not as big of one as Security Hall, rest assured that it had nothing to do with the time limit. Well, maybe a little bit to do with it. Being on a time limit period definitely encourages you to play riskier, sloppier, and you're a small child who's freaking out about how if you don't finish a level in time, Sonic's gonna blows up! But nah, it was, for whatever reason, the cluster of floating platforms in the middle of the stage, a completely trivial obstacle if you just homing attack 2 enemies in a spring, and the falling platforms at the end of the stage, which you just gotta go, like, a little fast, that's all. But I swear, these were the hardest things ever when I was 10. The ladder's especially funny cause, like, that ending section is actually a little tricky in hard mode, forcing you to get a bit creative with the bounce bracelet to outpace the falling platforms, but that's also, like, the only interesting thing about any of the missions here. Except, I guess, hard mode also adding some randomly scattered spike balls and a few of the half pipes. Really, the way you play the game tends to change the least between missions and speed stages. They're definitely the levels that benefit least from having extra missions at all, but they're already baseline fun enough that I don't, like, mind replaying them either, so... Anyways, yeah, Green Forest is fun, good mix of platforming, running fast, and a hefty bit of spectacle. Lots of big loops, the huge tree you climb the side of, and the bungee vine towards the end that's just a fun little set piece. It's also a bit on the linear side, especially with most of its high paths being easier to take than its low paths, but I wouldn't say the stage ever gets boring for it, just not as remarkable or rewarding as every other Sonic stage. That's the irony of it. The stage that wowed me as a child might be Sonic's easiest stage. Maybe not to clear, but certainly to master. Getting straight A's is a pretty free ride if you know what you're doing, which I can't say about any of his other levels, even Green Hill. It just doesn't demand much out of you. That doesn't make Green Forest a bad stage, it just makes it the Sonic stage that stuck with me the least over the years, even despite my history with it. I just think the 16 stages above it are all a little more special than it, that's all. Number 16.
Intruder alert. Assume level 1 defense formation.
What a way to kick off a game, huh? Like, okay, yeah, most people are gonna start with the hero story, but Iron Gate is really where the story begins, with Eggman infiltrating a military base, where the spectacle is doing a lot of the work. Alarms blaring, gun throwing dozens of robots your way to no avail, door after door being shut in your face just to be blasted through, security growing more and more desperate the deeper the Doctor gets, and none of it doing a damn thing to stop him. And God doesn't make you feel powerful. Like, yes, it's easy. It's a tutorial stage, so of course it is, but it's elevated so high by its atmosphere, cause it's ultimately not that different from Prison Lane as a stage, but there's just so much that sets it apart. A much stronger sense of urgency, better overall level pacing, and the lighting that goes such a long way to sell its atmosphere, which, if you're playing on Steam, I beg you to install the mod that fixes the lighting in this stage. It's such a big deal. Iron Gate also benefits a lot more from coming back later with more power-ups. The jet engine that lets you skip the 2 long elevator rides should you choose to, the large cannon that lets you blast through Iron Gate's iron crates, and get the laser blaster that really lets you go to town on the enemies, and enhanced armor that encourages you to play even more aggressively than before. Most mech stages are more of a romp. Iron Gate is a full-on rampage. It really establishes Eggman as a force to be reckoned with, one he continued to be for, well, most of the game, really. I'm hard-pressed to think of any game in the series where the Doctor's more successful in achieving his goals other than maybe Unleashed, and he certainly feels more threatening here. I also want to give special mention to its Lost Chow mission, which is 1, nicely placed right in the middle of the stage, 2, makes you actually explore and platform around in ways the next stages rarely do, and 3, makes it exceptionally obvious where Security Hall got its geometry from. See, I told you. Which it's especially funny considering the 2 stages have a lot in common. Pretty good versions of their respective level types, elevated by their presentation and context. Like, I'm not sure this is better than Green Forest as a stage, but I sure do think it's a lot cooler. Expect that to be a running theme for most of Eggman stages, really. Dude's got the best vibes of any character in the game. Number 15.
This place sure feels haunted. There's
You know me, the fighting freak Knuckles, and we're at Pumpkin Hill. You ready? I ain't gonna let it get to me. I'm just gonna creep down at Pumpkin Hill. I got to.
Okay, for real though, am I underrating this one? I think it's pretty safe to say Pumpkin Hill is the consensus favorite treasure hunting stage in the game, no less because of its incredibly iconic stage theme, probably only third to Escape from the City and Live and Learn on that front, and having a fairly unique theme too, shared only by Skyrail, which has completely different vibes to this stage's overtly spooky Halloweeny aesthetic, but also like, it's just a really good hunting stage. It follows the hub and 3 branches setup a lot of stages do, but it's also a wide open space where you have the means to go up or down just as fast as moving horizontally. And each of its 3 main mountains is very visually distinct even at a glance, so it's fairly hard to get lost even despite how big the stage is. It's basically just a refined and improved take on Red Mountain from Adventure 1. Iteration, remember when Sega used to do that instead of tossing every new idea in the dumpster when it wasn't an immediate success? I've also always been greatly amused at how Sonic Team handled making sure you don't miss the shovel claws in this stage. They're right in front of you at the start, so like, most players are going to be drawn to them immediately, but just in case, they added a check to make sure at least one ammo shard requires them if you haven't picked up a shovel claws yet, which is just so simple yet so elegant. Game development is really cool like that. Really, I've got nothing but good things to say about Pumpkin Hill. Like, okay, its missions, the 100 ring mission makes you run around just enough without the rings ever feeling too sparse. The Lost Chow is in a pretty obvious but fun place at the highest point of the level. The time limit of 3 minutes is perfect, no notes, and hard mode, while nothing outstanding, has all of its pieces in at least moderately fun places. It's just an all-around good stage. Just nothing about it has ever really, like, wowed me either. It's a well-designed stage, but it's not my favorite hunting stage. It's got a nice aesthetic, but it's not my favorite aesthetic. Hell, even its stage theme isn't my favorite of Knuckles'. I'd personally rank it 4th place, below the aforementioned Death Chamber and the other 2 Knuckles stages we have yet to see. Just like, being a stage I like only goes so far when there's so many stages in this game I genuinely love. Number 14.
Those idiots will never find my hidden base inside this pyramid. Let's take care of it.
Sand Ocean may be the level that changes the most between your first and second playthroughs. I remember really struggling with this stage as a kid, cause like, platforming on moving platforms over insta-death quicksand? Wow, that's really hard. There's so many spots where it's really easy to die, and even when you come back as an adult, you're trying to play the level fast, making some risky jumps, and dying for your hubris. Like, no joke, I feel like this was, and may still be, the hardest of all of Eggman stages. When you don't have the jet engine, of course. The one power-up that turns Sand Ocean from a tough level to an an absolute joke, since you can now just fly over all your problems. Platforming section, jet it. Well, you have to run around, jet it. Long back and forth over falling columns, jet it, baby. It's genuinely just so fun to speed through this level with upgraded mobility, and really satisfying too, especially if you're a 10-year-old who really struggled with it the first time. It's a good, albeit slightly tricky stage your first time through, but it's a great stage once you have the tools to make it a breeze. No more waiting on cycles, now you're encouraged to cut all the corners you can. It's also got the most baffling Lost Chow in the entire game, the only one where I know for a fact you weren't expected to have the Mystic Melody for, cause you, don't need it. There is no Mystic Melody pedestal on the way to the Lost Chow, just a bit of platforming. No, the Mystic Melody pedestal skips most of the stage, which is really cool at first, until you realize it's pretty much just a prank by the devs, since like, you're not exactly gonna get a good score by playing only the last third of the stage, whoops. Which the other thing that stands out about Sand Ocean to me is that it's weirdly hard to score well in. There's a lot of small combos you can rack up here and there, but not a lot of big ones. You really gotta make the most of what you're given, and try not to miss any bots along the way if you want to cross the A-rank thresholds, and honestly, I wish more stages made you try that hard. It's not like the stage is particularly long anyways, I don't mind replaying it. Also, ooh, the vibes of this one. The desert at night is so pretty, and yet so ominous. I've always been fascinated with those columns erupting fire in the background, and really, the use of fire throughout the stage and the lights and shadows they cast just gives it this mystical atmosphere. It's so cool. Much like the color palette. Dark blues, reds, and a variety of browns, it all just works, is pleasant to look at. Tack on an absolutely fantastic long shot towards the end of the stage, with both the moon and the pyramid looming over the horizon. That's art right there, baby. Again, Eggman's stages just have immaculate vibes, I tell ya. Number 13. Is Black Doom in the house? Cause it sure feels like Radical Highway out here. Shadow's character-defining stage, a level that's red and black all over just like he is, and I mean, yeah, it's really good. I might not be as high on it as everyone else, but I do like it a lot. Radical Highway's bread and butter is spectacle. Lots of big loops, rockets carrying you over huge pits of the skydiving sections, the Tower of Springs, even more loops. Like, okay, is it just me, or is this stage almost all spectacle? Other speed stages, sure, they have their moments, but I don't think any stage in the game is more guilty than Radical Highway of making you watch it play itself more than you actually get to play it. Like, so, I took my footage into my editor to check, and even being generous, there's a whopping 40 seconds of this 3-minute level where you have no meaningful control whatsoever. That's nearly a quarter of your playtime, every time, going towards watching Shadow run himself through loops. Which, like, it's cool the first few times, but y'all, I have played this stage so many times. I think I'm good on loop cutscenes for one lifetime. It's especially egregious given that Radical Highway also has one of the strictest time limits in the game. 3 minutes is barely enough time for the average player to finish a level, much less if you're trying to score well, which the level is also pretty strict about. Normally I think I'd embrace that challenge, but here, when I'm running out of time because a cutscene took too long, I don't know, it feels especially bad. But okay, enough complaining. The parts of the level you do get to play are fun enough to make up for it. Like, you definitely have to interact a lot more than just running. Bouncing off enemies, grabbing pulleys, trick jumping off ramps, flying off poles, the entire bridge set piece where you can take the easier lower path or the faster, more rewarding upper path, or even skip that and just run along the railings if you're really trying to save time. You've got options aplenty whenever you do have options, and the Lost Chow is one of the more sneakily hidden ones for sure, and kinda sick, not gonna lie. Making you grind backwards on the cables of the golden goddamn gate bridge? Yeah, okay, that rules. That you can grind on them at all is just really cool, and Radical Highway is just a cool stage in general. A constant assault from Gun trying to catch who they think is Sonic the Hedgehog, bombs flying all across the nighttime cityscape sky. I may have a thing for nighttime vibes if the last few stages are any indication. I think, ultimately, Radical Highway is a stage I have more mixed feelings on than any other stage in the game, where it's equal parts cool, fun, and frustrating, and were that the case for one of the other styles of gameplay, it might have tanked its spot in the ranking a bit more, but again, y'all, Certified Hedgehog gameplay is just so good in this game, I can't help it. Number 12.
I didn't expect the inside of the mines to be like that.
Full stop, Aquatic Mine is up this high because I've always just been really fascinated with its physical layout. A big, tall central room that has a half dozen corridors and side rooms attached to it, often interacting with each other in weird, interesting ways. Like, say, the route to the Lost Chow has you going up to the top of the level, then using a hidden passage to get into the ghost room while it's still underwater, which you can't otherwise do, to find another hidden passage in the ceiling that leads to the Lost Chow. That's an excursion, man. And the devs knew this level's layout was really cool because because by god did they try and make the most of it. Every single offshoot has something hidden at its end in at least one mission. The long, scary underwater tunnel to the air necklace that's also your primary source of rings during mission 2, the aforementioned Lost Chow mission, which they did also kinda lazily put a hard mode emerald shard near as well, which, okay, and the Abyss, which is like a genuinely creepy location. Only accessible when the water level is at its highest, filled to the brim of spike balls, and it goes deep, so you're pretty much guaranteed to drown if you don't have the air necklace. What a horrible place to die in. Which, yeah, there's really unnerving vibes to the level as a whole. Pumpkin Hill and Death Chamber are spooky too, but Aquatic Mine is, well, an abandoned mine. The kind of place where people did actually die. And, that water's probably pretty toxic too. It's just weirdly desolate for a Sonic game, in a way that the relatively relaxed stage theme can only do so much to pave over, and the song's kind of unsettling in its own way too. All this is, of course, despite the fact that, as a hunting stage, it's not very good. The Emerald Radar is wall agnostic, so you can have an Emerald Shard pinging yellow on the other side of a wall where you can't reach it. All the long dead ends take a while to check, and force you to backtrack a lot too, and the rising and lowering water gimmick is in that same vein of mildly annoying as security hall safes, just a bit more tedious given you're going to be doing a lot of slow swimming, which, yeah, that also works against the stage. It's a lot of small things that add up to Aquatic Mine being the least fun of Knuckles' stages to actually play. But man, I don't really care. This is the kind of space that makes me want to explore it. If I find some shiny things along the way, that's just a bonus. Sometimes you just gotta let the part of your brain that thinks something is cool win over the part that thinks something is bad. And I think Aquatic Mine is just plain neat, smiley face. Number 11. Metal Harbor is a stage all about following the script, and if you follow the script just right, it looks cool and the game pats you on the back for doing it. Like, it's unquestionably the most linear of all of Sonic's stages, of every speed stage in the game really, hardly a branching path to be found anywhere. You will play the level the way God intended, and you will like it. And I do. I like it a lot. Metal Harbor missing the top 10 is a testament to how strong everything left is, not a knock against it. Like, I think it's pretty widely agreed that this stage's A rank, specifically the first missions, is the strictest score requirement in the game. You need a whopping 20k points for it, and it's only barely possible even when you know what you're doing. There's so many little tricks that devs added in that drip feed you points, and they expect you to take damn near every last one of them if you want to cross that score threshold. And good friggin' luck getting that 20k without grabbing the top of the rocket, which, of course, if you fail, you're throwing your entire runaway over. But if you follow the script just right, sweet, sweet pink gold can be yours. And the 100 ring mission of all things follows in its footsteps. It's so funny that grabbing every ring possible, which is unusually easy to do for a speed stage, nets you 99 rings right before a long drought of them, except there's this one cheeky little ring hidden on top of a roof where you're likely not gonna check that'll get you the mission done way earlier. Another scripted victory. And yeah, that's both really cool and also my biggest knock against the stage. Like with Radical Highway, it's all spectacle. The game's showing you a cool thing instead of letting you make cool things happen yourself. It makes the stage an easy crowd pleaser on a first time playthrough because, like, it is sick as hell, but as a result, it doesn't lend itself to the same replayability as most other speed stages. More than any other stage, it feels like there's a right way to score well, and it's not particularly hard to do once you know how to do it. Also, this stage loves homing attack chains, and for as much as Sonic Adventure 2 is my beloved baby, the homing attack is not perfect in this game. Ugh. It's the kind of thing that's cool when it works, but even with 20 years of experience, sometimes it just doesn't work, and I get screwed for it. It's sort of a general issue across the speed stages, but it's by far most pronounced here, especially in hard mode. And again, I don't find the harbor aesthetic particularly interesting, though Metal Harbor certainly does a lot more of it than Weapons Bed, and the tune's of course pretty great too. Shout out Ska, gotta be one of my favorite genders. And the levels, again, so short, especially considering how much of it plays itself. It's ultimately the stage that's shrunk on me the most over the years, one that I used to consider one of my favorites in the game, but just doesn't hit the same way that it used to. Still really good, it just doesn't appeal to me quite as much as everything in the top 10. Number 10. You know, I think it's a shame that Shadow's levels generally aren't as good as Sonic's, especially since he only has 4 of them to his name. Doubly so considering his best stage is also the one that's most similar to one of Sonic's, and an inferior copy at that. It's just so much more shallow as a gameplay experience. That's really how most of Shadow's stages, sans Final Chase, feel shallow. They look cool, but they don't meaningfully challenge you, and often don't even run long enough to leave an impact. Like, White Jungle isn't that much shorter than Green Forest, but it feels like so much less happens in it. There's more long half pipes, more vine swings, and for whatever reason, an emphasis on somersaulting under barriers that tends to kill the pace of the level, while also lacking the few notable platforming challenges its counterpart had to offer. When it's done, I don't feel like I accomplished much, but hey, at least it was really cool. And it's at this point you've probably asked, hey Crow, you ranked this so much higher than Green Forest, what gives? And to you I ask, like, did you even watch the rest of the video? You know exactly why this is up so high, and I've already said it. It was really cool. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Turns out setting a somewhat bland forest aesthetic during a gloomy rainstorm and pairing it with in what can only be described as the composers being given a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and perfectly understanding the assignment, a jungle track, like the genre jungle, it all clicks, and it's just so cool. Like, yeah, it's easy, almost pitifully so. The time limit's even longer than Green Forest, despite the stage being way easier. Hell, it's easier than Radical Highway. But at the same time, that all kind of just adds to how cool it is. Up to this point in the story, Shadow has yet to take a single L. Of course he's gonna breeze through any and all obstacles in his way. It's only after meeting his match in Sonic and having his sense of superiority shaken that he really starts to take things seriously. The stage is like one last hurrah for the unstoppable force before it meets his immovable object. Also, like, the song is so good. Loved it from the moment I heard it. Easily one of my favorite songs in the game, and I love most of the soundtrack, so that's saying something. If it wasn't gonna add even more runtime to an already long video, I'd be half tempted to do a ranking of just the stage themes, but no, gotta reel things in a little bit here. The missions pretty much continue the trend of the level being cooler to look at than it is to play. The Lost Child's so close to the goal ring that it actually takes longer to find than just beating the stage normally. The time limit's a joke, and the hard mode, well, it's a bit more meaningfully different than some other stages, actually gives the level some things, but it's not like it's harder than even the normal mission of Final Chase, so. I've also always been incredibly amused at how White Jungle's got the only mandatory use of Shadow's Light Dash, and it's completely skippable too, not even particularly hard to do. You shouldn't, since you'll need it for like 1 or 2 hard mode missions, but it's like the easiest sequence break to do in the randomizer. I always do it whenever I've got the chance. Really, there's just nothing about White Jungle I dislike. All its perceived flaws are things I don't really care about when the experience of playing the level is so strong even despite them, and it really just sells Shadow as the cool, edgy hog the world fell in love with back in 2001 or thereabouts. It's just not quite substantive enough for me to justify ranking it any higher, though at the same time, I'm probably gonna get some weird looks for ranking it below this next stage, so. Number 9. Ooh boy, I might have some explaining to do here. I feel like if I ran a least favorite stage in the game poll, Eternal Engine would probably finish second only to Mad Space. Yes, lower than even the kart stages. And yet, here I have it in the top 10. Honestly, I'm almost half tempted to put it even higher, just out of contrarianism, but no, I can't possibly justify having it above any of the absolute bangers we have left. But to be clear, it rules and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. In short, the main reason I love Eternal Engine so much is just that, like, this is the only stage in the game that I still find meaningfully challenging. Pretty unquestionably the most difficult stage in the game, both to clear and to A rank. Like, I love Cosmic Wall 2, should be a given considering it hasn't shown up yet either, but it's not really a fitting cap to the difficulty curve of the mech stages the way Eternal Engine is. And it all comes down to how the stage makes you play more tactically than any other mech stage. Carelessly blasting down everything in your path will let you an explosion to the face or an airlock ejection to the, everything. Tails was not the imposter. But also, like, well, those dynamite packs do count for your combo, so like, you do want to blow them up, right? It's just rewarding to plan your route through all these big, dangerous rooms, figure out the best way to kill enemies, the best times to blow up dynamite packs, all while reducing the risk to yourself. And frankly, no other mech stage in the game is as diverse as Eternal Engine either. The more strategic indoor rooms are only part of the puzzle. Outdoor areas where platforming becomes the main risk, mini puzzles to ascend tall vertical shafts, a big, long fall at the very end of the stage, and lots of little moments tying it all together to make for a long, grueling, but incredibly rewarding gameplay experience. Like, yes, again, it's challenging, but I'd hardly consider that a bad thing. This is the end game. It should be kicking your butt, cause it's not like the stage is unfair either. There's no randomly dropping bombs or enemies that pop out of nowhere. The camera never hides anything from you, and dynamite packs are always highlighted and easy to spot at a glance. And the stage gives you healing packs to recharge your health in just the right spots as a bit of compensation for how long and unrelenting it is. Playing through without dying is tense, but all that does is make succeeding feel even sweeter. Maybe it's just 20 years of Sonic Adventure 2 brain rot, but it's one of the few stages where I still feel like I really have to earn those A ranks. Which I also have to praise the level's hard mode, which doesn't have any big massive overhauls, but it just ever so slightly tunes up the difficulty of an already tough stage to make it probably the second most challenging hard mode in the entire game. Not that many more enemies, but they're all more aggressive. More dynamite packs on both airlocks and platforms alike to make you play even more carefully. Smaller moving platforms to make the platforming feel just a bit scarier. Sparser healing packs, most of them replaced by ring capsules to make health management that much more important. Getting to the end in one piece is tough, but that just makes it even more satisfying. Like, not to be too down on the detractors because, like, I get it. The game challenged you, forced you to actually engage with it rather than unga-bungaing straight through it. It's not a level I would have called one of my favorites my first time through the game either, mostly because I was a small child and I was like, yeah, Sonic Adventure 2, best game ever, about every single level, or at least the ones that didn't involve driving a car, but like, it's a level I've learned to love, learned to respect, and it's a level that respects you as a player in turn. If you've got a problem with that, well, as the kids these days like to say, get good. Oh, and yeah, the stage is also just broadly really cool too. I've always really dug how all the stages that take place inside the arc like this have completely different vibes. It's like a masterclass in using lighting to create different atmospheres. Eternal Engine has the brightest setting of them all, again perfect for Tails' personality, and the music's a great mix of driving and intense that fits in well with, well, how bloody hard the stage is. Really, and I know I'm being hypocritical in saying this, but the difficulty is probably the only reason it isn't any higher here, cause like, yeah, maybe I'm not always in the mood to be challenged this much. It's far less casual than most of the game is, but when I'm looking for that challenge, I'd be hard-pressed to find a better stage in the game for it. Number 8. There's definitely some irony in that both the best and worst treasure hunting stages are parallels of each other. And where Mad Space does everything wrong, Meteor Herd does everything right. Like, okay, the first time I played this stage as, again, a 10-year-old, it took me so long, like upwards of 20 minutes, because the level is just so big. But when you start to learn the layout of the level, it honestly isn't that big. Like, okay, the big open ground area is a lot of space, but Knuckles runs so fast that you can cover all of it pretty quickly. And then the rest of the stage, it's mostly just a column of platforms straight up the middle of the map, with the arcs underhanging at the top. And it's surprisingly quick to get from the bottom to the top, and even quicker to get back down. So for as big as the level is, it's shockingly navigable, and that's its biggest strength. Much like Eternal Engine, Meteor Herd presents the treasure hunting stage's most fair challenge, where there's a lot of ground to cover, but learning the layout, the landmarks, and all the ways to get from point A to B can turn it from an imposing challenge to a snappy and rewarding sweep. No real gimmicks, no lack of depth like the tutorial stages, just pure high-quality treasure hunting. What puts it above Pumpkin Hill for me is that I just think the level's so much cooler. Like, for one, the song. It's so out of step with all of Knuckles' other tunes. All the other stage teams follow a pretty uniform chill and jazzy vibe, but Meteor Herd is upbeat and otherworldly. It's like the only song in the game that really sounds like space, which any longtime viewers of my music-related content will know I have a particular weakness for, which, yeah, the stage is also just super cool to look at. The machines littering the surface beg the question of what they're even doing here. Was Gun mining moon rocks or something? Second abandoned mine Knuckles has come across as well. 2 nickels and all that. And I love having the arena for Knuckles and Rouge's showdown as the centerpiece of the stage. It's both just a cool set piece, and contextualizing the battle as taking place in the level we just got done exploring creates a cool sense of continuity. Also, you can, like, actually open up the center platform, which is not only just really cool, a type of environmental interaction I wish the game did more of, but Knuckles gets some 6 shades for your troubles? Shades that help a lot with the otherwise fairly tricky 100 ring mission to boot? Sweet. Like, yeah, hitting the meteor to break open the doors around the center platform, that's kinda annoying, especially for the really tricky hard mode Emerald Shard, but like, that's about the only thing I don't like about this level. The last mission also has a few other fun quirks, like this weird red bomb ship that shows up here and only here. I swear I remember reading some rumor that its bombs insta-killed you, but that's obviously not true. Apparently the only difference is that it can reload its bombs. It's odd, but it's cool that it exists. And being able to chain the last 2 shards by diving into the middle shard from above is really fun too. Not the intended method, but by far the cooler one. Meteor Herd is a stage I find equal parts fascinating and enjoyable, both in the small things and the overall package. It gets my mind racing the same way Aquatic Mine does, while also just being so much better to actually play, and play and play and play, because it's easily the hunting stage I find myself drawn back to the most. It's the poster child for why the hunting stages have had so much more longevity for me than the others. And I want to take some time here to eulogize the hunting stages, both on this list and just in general, cause like, yeah, they're probably never coming back, and that's a shame. Sonic Team really had something here, a style of gameplay that's no less fast, no less engaging, and replayable in its own way gameplay completely distinct from the speed stages, and they just gave up on it after having nearly perfected it on its second outing. It's exactly the reason why Sonic Team's refusal to iterate on ideas drives me up a wall. And yeah, the hunting stages did end up with the lowest peak of all three gameplay types on this list, but that's more so because the stages themselves tend to be more backdrops for the inherently enjoyable treasure hunting gameplay, rather than the spectacle-filled main attractions of the speed and next stages. I do genuinely mean it when I say I find treasure hunting to be about on par with, or even sometimes more enjoyable than certified headshot gameplay, and I really would love to see someone, whether it be Sonic Team themselves or a passionate indie team taking up their mantle, take another crack at this style of gameplay. Someday. I can dream, right? Number 7.
Attention all units. Suspects.
I do not feel a particular need to waste too much time telling y'all why City Escape, the most acclaimed and iconic level in Sonic Adventure 2, is so good. Like, yes, duh, we've been known. Yada yada legendary stage theme, yada yada excellent setting, yada yada absolutely packed with spectacle, yada yada organically teaches you every move and mechanic in Sonic's kit while also giving you lots of room to experiment, yada yada. Okay, good, we got all that out of the way. But if you've been paying attention, you'll note that this is only the 4th highest ranked of all of Sonic's stages here. Yes, 4 of the top 7 are Sonic levels. I don't think that's all that surprising or controversial. Calling City Escape one of Sonic's weaker stages may be a bit more controversial. I guess it's true that I find it a bit overrated, and that may be working against it, but I do just genuinely like the other stages more than it. But it's also, like, so much better than every one of Shadow's stages. Like, even just comparing it to his first stage, Radical Highway, they both have a city aesthetic, they're of about equal length, but City Escape just does so much more with its runtime. It has its moments of spectacle too, sure, but like, most of them are, you know, actually playable. Aside from the building run, you're in full control throughout the entire stage. Imagine how lame it'd be if the boarding section or truck chase were completely scripted. And more than that, I have formational memories of this stage in particular's time limit mission. As a kid, I started doing all the missions in order, and City Escape's 3-minute time limit just felt completely impossible to a 10-year-old. Like, oh no, is every level gonna be this hard? Grinding and grinding away at the stage, and then finally beating the time limit with less than a second to spare, just to get slapped with a bad rank because I wasn't going out of my way to rack up points at all. Utterly demoralizing. Of course, that's because these early Sonic stages are especially fine-tuned to absolutely make you work for those A ranks. You gotta do as many tricks as you can, kill every bot that stands in your way, grind down as many rails as possible, make sure you don't miss the gold beetle, and you're probably not getting that 18k if you don't finish the stage in under 3 minutes, even on the first mission. Of every A rank in the game, I feel like that one was the one I was most proud of as a kid. Now I get it on the regular. Child me would be so thrilled. City Escape is just a plain awesome stage, but it's also one that pushes you towards mastery unlike most any other stage in the game, and more than the spectacle, more than the stage theme, I think that's what's always stuck with me the most about it. But like, okay, yeah, that stage theme does rule.
Follow me, set me free. Trust me and we will escape from the city.
Yeah, there's a reason I made my parents buy me a copy of this soundtrack, huh? Number 6. Honestly, as a kid, the mere existence of Final Rush blew my mind. Like, Crazy Gadget was obviously the final level, right? It was hard enough that there was no way it couldn't be. And it did make sense that there were 15 levels in each story, even though I'd already beaten the Dark Story and it ended after stage 14, but shh, kids can't count. So finally clearing Crazy Gadget, taking down Eggman, seeing how Sonic saved himself from certain death, and watching him run down a tunnel to go fight Shadow, only to be met with a stage 16 instead, absolutely rocked my world. Wait, there's more? Hell yeah. And it helps that the stage itself is just plain sick. Grinding around at the speed of sound, nothing but a thin rail between you and the earth below, where one little slip up means burning alive in the earth's atmosphere, but the music gets your blood pumping, the sheer scope of the arc is breathtaking, got some huge Superstructure vibes throughout, Superstructure's my beloved, and it's all just so colorful and pretty to look at. It even leads perfectly into Sonic and Shadow's confrontation, what with that tunnel at the very end. But even more than that, it's the level design that continues to impress me the most. In yet another twist of irony, it turns out that Final Rush, the most literally on-rails level in the entire game, is also the one that gives you the most options. Like, there's almost no part of the stage where you only have one possible way to progress, and it establishes this right from the start, immediately presenting you with 3 paths, one of which is easier than the other 2, while also being, faster. So yeah, that's also a trend of this stage. I mean, you could take all these alternate paths, but sometimes you really shouldn't. But screw it, I appreciate that they're there at all, more than I think that it's kinda silly that they're both harder and slower, cause like, it gives me you something to explore. And it's not true for every branching path anyways. The long descending rail that lets you skip a good chunk of the stage, the suspended rails that let you skip a little loop, etc, etc, like that there are even options at all makes Final Rush just feel so much more rewarding to play than the more linear levels. I especially have to highlight the long upwards platforming gauntlet in the middle of the stage, which might be my favorite physical level design in, frick, all of 3D Sonic, period. Especially when you figure out that jumping right near the top of the half-pipe rails gives you a ton of height. Both the Gold Beetle, which is probably my favorite in the game, and the Lost Chow, also one of my favorites in the game, expect this out of you, so there's like an organic way to learn this, but it's not something you have to learn either. But if you do, it lets you take advantage of so many cool shortcuts. It's like the pinnacle of mastery of game mechanics, rewarding you with a completely new way to play the level. Really, the biggest knock against the stage is that for how inherently replayable it is, for how much potential it has to demand mastery, its A ranks just kinda don't. You can miss thousands of points and still easily nab the A rank. It ends up feeling kinda brainless as long as you're halfway competent at the level. But like, you can still impose that challenge on yourself anyways, even if the game doesn't, because it just feels good to score well, you know? And of course, your enjoyment of Final Rush really hinges on your understanding of rails in this game, and funny childhood moment time, the first time I played the stage, I straight up did not know you could crouch to go faster, which did actually make some parts of the level impossible, specifically the parts where you have to go up long rails. It also just generally made the level a lot slower and thus way less cool to look at. And you really need to understand how rail switching works, otherwise it can lead to some really cheap feeling deaths too. If there's anything to hold against Final Rush, it's exactly that so much of Sonic's movement is tossed aside in favor of the game's jankiest mechanic, but, and I'm aware this is just sheer bias, but I've just got way too much experience with the rail grinding in this game to really care, and I'm too in awe at the sheer quality of the level design to even notice. And again, it's just so sick. Rail grinding is so sick. Soap Shoes may have long since gone the way of the dodo, but their impact in the series is felt even to this day. Like, I just cannot imagine a new Sonic game without rails. They're an integral part of the series, and they only exist because of a silly little promotional campaign. That's art, man. Number 5. Eggman out here voguing to his own stage theme, god damn. It's a surprisingly uplifting and bouncy tune for a surprisingly, uplifting and bouncy level. Actually, no, that fits. Literally uplifting, of course, since Cosmic Wall is a level where you're finally freed from the shackles of gravity, for at least a few seconds at a time anyways. Seriously though, after an entire game of running around in these clumsy heavy mechs, being able to fly around everywhere feels so goddamn freeing. And maybe Eggman's having such a good time because Cosmic Wall is him at the height of his power. One single blasted blue blur away from finally achieving his lifelong dream, and he's mere hours from taking care of that problem for good. So, of course, the stage is good at making you feel powerful too. Literal hundreds of enemies standing in your way, and not one can do a single thing to stop the Doctor. Tall vertical shafts? A novice mad scientist might struggle with that, but oh no, not this genius mad scientist. Up we go. Sure, it's not a hard level, really none of Eggman's stages are, but it fulfills its role so perfectly as a power trip to bookend Eggman's role in the story. Iron Gate already made him feel powerful, but Cosmic Wall just shows how far he's come in the time since. It's sheer catharsis, baby. Dopamine hit after dopamine hit, and all of them feel earned. Cause like, yeah, the stage is basically just a giant shooting gallery, start to finish, one that just so happens to have some platforming segments along the way. Hell, the rail platform sections cut out the middleman and just straight up lock you in place. So many opportunities to rack up combos, blowing up those big laser cannons that reward you with thousands of points each, seeing your score tally hit 50k, then 75k, even breaking into 6 digits, it's like the ultimate score attack. Funny number go up. And hard mode cranks it up to 11. Even more enemies means even more big combos. You'll be seeing so many rainbows you think it was a goddamn pride parade. Hey, maybe that's why Eggman's voguing so much. He's being gay and doing crimes. Hell yeah. And it even provides that extra bit of challenge. Much like Eternal Engine, there's so many enemies acting so much more aggressively that staying alive can be tricky. And dying right at the end of the longest level in the game, nothing more devastating. Which, yeah, if there's anything to hold against Cosmic Wall, it's that it is so damn long, but honestly, it never really feels it in the moment. Getting caught up in the adrenaline rush of blasting through boss and racking up high scores keeps me too preoccupied to even notice the time passing, because I'm just having too much goddamn fun, and I'm told that that makes time fly just like the good doctor himself is doing. I'm a bird, so I wouldn't know that much about it. And by the good grace of convicted criminal Yuji Naka himself, the 100 Ring and Lost Chow missions are mercifully brief. Both can be done in about a minute, thus balancing out how long the main missions take. Like, yeah, they knew. Don't beat a soon-to-be dead hedgehog, let the player bask in the triumphant vibes and colorful visuals just long enough for the power fantasy to stay fresh the whole way through. And the end result is a level I always have a dastardly good time with. Number 4. Is it me, or does Pyramid Cave go wildly overlooked among Sonic's level roster? Like, for one, it's his first stage since Green Forest, the long-awaited return to certified headshot gameplay, so it's already exciting on that front, but then the stage itself is also just great. Like, for one, the atmosphere. It's so much more imposing than any of the other Pyramid stages. It truly feels like you're storming Eggman's base, seeing just how much of this ancient structure he's retrofitted for his own nefarious schemes. The Doctor's grinning face plastered everywhere, snake buddies as far as the eye can see, those tall metallic pillars spewing fire, the giant swinging ships, the freaky yellow eyes on the wall, the swarm of neon signs at the end. There's just so much cool imagery. And the geometry, it's just so unusual. Long, winding half-pipe corridors, loops that turn at weird angles, it just feels so much more different than any other stage in the game. Hell, no other stage in the game uses these floor textures. I've become a parody myself. I'm out here praising floor textures, but I've genuinely always just really loved how they look. Pyramid Cave is a stage that just feels nice to exist in. It's also a stage that really encourages speed, both on a macro and micro scale. The hourglass doors especially, none of which are really all that strict, but make you work just hard enough that they can be kind of challenging on your first playthrough, which, yeah, of course, as a kid, this stage was kind of just a long series of small roadblocks for me. Being unable to climb out of the first big pit room, not understanding you can pick up this key to progress, this one hourglass door that really demands you spin dash to make its time limit, none of them stood in my way for that long compared to some of the game's bigger roadblocks, but they're all moments that firmly lodged themselves into my brain and made the stage all the more memorable for it. Pyramid Cave may well also be the hardest speed stage in the game to optimize, especially thanks to the two long winding hallways, which, yeah, you could just run straight through them, but you'd be missing out on so many points from jumping through all those hoops along the way, and maximizing your score without sacrificing speed in the process, especially on the second timed hallway, can be a real challenge. And the stage is home to the bounce bracelet, an ability I cannot praise highly enough. It's just so fun to play with, and again, lets you snap on the rails so much easier. Like, yeah, it'd probably be more broadly useful for it with just a stomp, one of the best additions to Sonic's Kid and Future games to their credit, but also, hee, funny ball go boing. Utterly wild that Shadow doesn't get this one himself. It makes him feel like a nerfed version of Sonic, which just completely goes against his character, you know? Ultimate life form and all? Let the ultimate life form bounce, damn it! Of course, the average attractor will point to the one singular time the level asks you to slow down a little and carry a key for like 15 seconds, let's be real, which, I mean, I'd rather be playing a thing than watching a thing. Plus, I quite like the hard mode revamp that makes you throw the key around. It's a cute little puzzle. And like, if you must be a baby about it, you can just skip it entirely. It's one of the easier speedrun tricks in the game, so it really isn't that big of a deal, y'all. Certainly not a deal breaker. Pyramid Cave's also got one of the weirder Lost Chows. Like, for one, the first Mystic Melody pedestal you find doesn't lead to the Lost Chow, but instead a path to a Chow box and a rocket that lets you escape a few loops. Don't think it's actually faster, it's just a neat little bit of exploration. No, the Lost Chow is, sigh, right near the end, but its timed pole swinging segment over a bottomless pit can be pretty tricky. It's yet another thing about the stage I've always found especially memorable. The only other real knock against the stage is that it has a really bad case of easy high path syndrome where, like, yeah, there are branching paths, but the low path is always a much slower punishment for failing to take the high path, which is always incredibly easy to take anyways. Maybe it's not as open as Final Rush, but you spend most of it on your feet instead of on rails, and it's still interactive enough the whole way through that every playthrough feels different, unlike your Radical Highways or your Metal Harbors. It's ultimately my favorite of Sonic stages just to play, and the only one where I get a little bit sad every time it's over. But really, all of this has just been me circling the drain, avoiding talking about the actual reason I love Pyramid Cave so much. Straight up, this is my favorite stage theme in the game. Like, it's unreal how good this song is. It's like the only one of Sonic's stage themes that really meets this environment in the middle. The Egyptian vibes and the deserty twang of the guitars melding together so well, and it's just got so many great little moments, like the soaring guitar leads punctuated by organ runs. The ominous break leading into the slickest groove of the entire soundtrack. Or the utterly fantastic steel drum breakdown at the end. Ugh. I love it, I love it! Most stage themes settle for 1 or 2 earworms, but Pyramid Cave's out here giving us like 5 of them. A lot of little moments that add up to something greater. That's what Pyramid Cave is. Not the absolute best design stage, not the stage with the strongest atmosphere, but a stage that just does everything really well, and one that's captivated me for 20 goddamn years because of it. Number 3.
So this is the space colony Ark. I have to locate the central control room that Shadow mentioned before he left.
One thing that's become clear to me over the years is that I really like when video game levels feel like places that could exist, like coherent physical spaces that just so happen to also function as fun platforming challenges in a way that feels incidental. Environmental platforming, I like to call it. It's again a big reason why I like Aquatic Mine as much as I do, and I think gaming as a whole likes this kind of design too, given the broader push towards realism and open world style design over the years. Even the Sonic series itself moved further and further in this direction throughout the 2000s, pretty much up through Unleashed. But frankly, I think that kind of design peaked in the series of Lost Colony. There is simply no other level in the game, hell maybe the entire franchise, that goes all in on atmosphere like this stage does. A long abandoned space colony sitting 50 years dormant after a tragedy that left hundreds dead. Sheer oppressive darkness, only briefly lit up by cannon blasts and the dim glow of the machinery lining the interior of the Ark. Ominous, moody music that really sells the idea that you're trespassing somewhere you really shouldn't be. It's the closest the series ever comes to a straight up horror game, and you best believe it was spooky as hell to a small child. And even more than Final Rush, it really makes the Ark feel like the massive mechanical superstructure it is, cause like those outdoor areas, they aren't outdoors at all. The walls are just so far off in the distance, it feels like the fastest of space. Even the quote-unquote bottomless pits in this stage are just a floor hundreds of feet beneath the precarious catwalks that the good doctor's heavy mech is stomping all over. Shocked that those things even hold at all. In hard mode, some of them don't. It's great. I don't think Eggman would survive Squid Game. Lost Colony is a stage where I'm just so utterly captivated by the atmosphere that I hardly even care about the stage itself. But like, it's a pretty solid one, all things considered. It's a more gentle Eternal Engine in a lot of ways, where the darkness encourages more cautious play, and the challenge comes from picking out the enemies flying at you out of the black. It's got a few fun little switch puzzles, it's got that long shooting gallery at the end, which incidentally is a fantastic set piece to boot. There's really nothing remarkable about it from a design perspective, but it uses its gimmick well and is a solid romp from start to finish. Really, the stage's biggest boast from a gameplay perspective is its introduction of the jet engine at precisely the right time in Eggman's story. After 2 whole stages of not but running and jumping, you're finally given a mobility tool that coincidentally helps the level really sell the vastness of the Ark while also creating some cool platforming challenges along the way. It stands in stark contrast to Tails' story giving you the jet booster right near the start of his second stage, not giving you nearly enough time to feel the mech's limitations beforehand. Mission-wise, I mean, yeah, it's fine. Again, the Lost Child is placed pretty well, love the sneaky little platform you could barely see, and the challenge of targeting an enemy mid-glide in the dark is a bit spicy. The time limit mission is pretty well tuned too, and hard mode has enough cheeky little moments that help the level show some things, and this goofy little platforming bit that's always amused me for as simple as it is. Nothing remarkable, sure, but all fun enough. This, more than any other stage, is probably the one where I'm letting the vibes win out over everything else, but like, I still find Lost Colony just as cool as it was over 20 years ago when I first played it, and I hope to continue to be entranced by its unnerving haunted atmosphere 20 more years down the line. And I guess here's where I should be eulogizing the mech stages as well, but like, I mean, if the style of gameplay never comes back, I wouldn't really miss it. It's definitely a distant third to the speed and treasure hunting stages in my mind, and for as much as I do enjoy it, I'm more than willing to admit that most of that's carried by experience and possible Stockholm Syndrome more than it is the gameplay itself being especially compelling. And Lost Colony being the mech's strongest outing should really speak to why. Frankly, I'm not sure it's the stage itself I like as much as it is just the fact that I'm getting to play as Eggman, doing villainous deeds, exploring darker, moodier environments than the series had ever really attempted before. Iron Gate, Sand Ocean, Lost Colony, these are all levels carried by their vibes, and Weapons Bed and Cosmic Wall are more about the power trips they inspire than anything else. They're all stages that exist more for the sake of how they make you feel rather than how they are to play, which is why most of Tails' stages fall so comparatively flat for me. I guess what I'm really trying to say is, god damn, we need more games where we get to play as Eggman. He's such a fun and imposing villain, especially opposite the blue blur, case in point. Number 2. Crazy Gadget, holy hell. So like, I've talked about walls I faced playing through the game as a kid, but like, Crazy Gadget is not a wall. It's not even a mountain. No, climbing a wall, climbing a mountain, those are things that can eventually be done, given enough time and perseverance. Trying to be Crazy Gadget felt like trying to touch the stars in the sky. I could never even come close. I was absolutely convinced I was never going to be good enough to beat this game, and it was all because of this one level. It was to the point where I damn near mythologized it as the hardest level in all of video games. And the funny thing is, it's not like it was a long series of small roadblocks like a pyramid cave. Like, yeah, it took me a second to figure out that one spot with the 3 switches. I keep pulling the middle one and it just kills me. What's up with that? Pull the other switches, dummy. The middle one's just the devs trolling you, or granting you a shortcut if you're bold enough to risk it. And some of the light dashes and homing attack chains are kind of scary too. The switch puzzles, the onslaught of artificial chaos, just the sheer length of the level, it's easily the most demanding of Sonic stages start to finish. But no, it's the last room of the level, the big mind-boggling gravity puzzle that just completely destroyed me. How cruel it is to have the goal in sight and yet be denied it time after time. Turns out that a small child who doesn't yet understand the language of game design struggles with a puzzle that, while ultimately fairly linear, makes you think just enough outside of the box that the box bursts open and lets those errant thoughts lead to completely wild attempts at solutions. Like, first problem, where do I go on this green block? I jump down to the ledge, but there's nowhere to go. Second problem, this yellow block is a dead end. I guess I have to jump on this switch from here? I actually did get this to work more than a few times, and frankly, I have no clue how I had the patience to keep trying, especially when there were game overs on the line. And I eventually managed to find some way to the final platform that didn't involve going near the switch that activated the rocket, straighting me at the goal with not but a spring that just kills you if you touch it. Did it do that on the Dreamcast? Is it supposed to do that? Who knows? I can't tell you exactly how long or exactly how many attempts it took to finally figure it out for the first time, but I did eventually get through it, and I felt like just the best gamer the world had ever seen until I got an E rank, because of course I did. And I made sure to commit that golden path to memory. I can still recite it from memory 20 goddamn years later. That's how much of an impact this utterly ridiculous stage had on me. The hardest level in all of video gaming, for sure. And the worst part of it all, every single time you entered this room, Eggman taunts Sonic that he'll never leave it alive. And every single time, I proved him right. Which, like, just the sheer context of this level is so fricked up. Eggman's got Amy held hostage at gunpoint, demanding Sonic bring him the last Chaos Emerald, constantly threatening you throughout the stage the longer you take, and the entire time, he knows Sonic doesn't even have the real emerald. It's all just Eggman leading Sonic to his death by sending him at Mach speed through a colossal death trap, and if the Hedgehog happens to perish along the way, all that really means is that he won't have to get his own hands dirty. So hurry up, Sonic. Mess up, Sonic. The pressure's on. Crazy Gadget, then, is the stage for the battle between Sonic and Eggman's wills, driven home all the more by the stage's theme, which sounds like the exact midpoint between the Hedgehog's and the Doctor's respective styles. The soaring guitars of the former and the industrial rock edge of the latter. All the while, the interior of the Ark is swamped in an oppressive green fog, a haze that invites a sense of unease, of danger, but a haze that ultimately Sonic will make it through, prove it to you. But would you believe that it gets worse? Crazy Gadget's hard mode is by far the most meaningfully different of any stage in the game. Jesus Christ. It feels like it was designed specifically to screw with those who had had the stage seared into their brains, i.e. me. All the safest paths removed and often replaced with something much more demanding. So many extra platforming gauntlets, up the sides of walls, over pits of acid, this goddamn terrifying upside down homing attack chain that never feels comfortable, all culminating in the ultimate troll, moving the rocket switch in the final room, making you redo anywhere from half to all of the room to hit it. For my money, this was the hardest stage in all of Sonic until the advent of Eggman Land. And there's definitely an alternate world where the sheer difficulty of the stage, the amount of time I spent throwing myself at it over and over again, led me to hate it rather than adore it, but if there's one thing stronger than steel, it's the tenacity of a child trying to beat a game they're absolutely enthralled with. I wish I were half as stubborn and patient nowadays. And then going from beating it to mastering it, nothing else has ever made me feel more like a god gamer. The sheer reverence I hold for Crazy Gadget has long since buried any possible frustration I might have experienced some 20 odd years ago, and I'd be hard pressed to name any level in any game that's left more of an impact on me than this one.
That was cool!
The ultimate life form. Chaos control.
Space desperation.
Supersonic.
Tears.
Untamed power. Maria.
Professor Gerald. The truth about 50 years ago.
Sonic Adventure 2. Last episode. Wishes are eternal.
There was really never going to be anything else topping this list.
System alert. System alert. The intruder has reached the system area. Initiate debug program.
You don't get it. You don't get it. Cannon's Core was just something else entirely. There just hadn't been anything else like this in the series up to this point. Adventure 1's finale had high stakes too, sure, but it was ultimately the Sonic show. But Adventure 2's last story, it's everyone in the game, the heroes and the villains working together to save the entire world. A final gauntlet that had been teased throughout the game. Like, we keep seeing this map of the Ark popping up all over the place with a suspiciously well-detailed center area, one that, if you break it down into parts, more than vaguely resembles the different sections of the level. They knew this was the coolest goddamn thing ever, and they went out of their way to hype it up as much as possible. And it also doubles as a test of everything you've learned over the course of the game, all tied together by its central gimmick of stopping time. One that the game doesn't even try to explain, and honestly, good. We don't need to know. Let it remain mysterious, that only makes it cooler. It's ultimately 5 challenging mini-levels strung together into what felt like an insurmountable marathon of a level, one that's just as ingrained into my mind as Crazy Gadget was, just for how goddamn many lives it took me to finally clear it, where speeding through Tails' relatively tame intro section eventually became second nature to me.
Alright, now
But it's with Eggman where the difficulty really starts to ramp up. More dangerous enemies, more difficult platforming, easily the longest segment of the level, which I have no qualms with. He's the star of the game more than anyone else is, except maybe Shadow, who, well, more on him later, but like, this was such a big deal. The first and to date only time the Doctors worked with the heroes for the sake of the greater good, cause if the world's destroyed, then that means there's no more world left for him to conquer. And no, neither Chronicles nor Lost World count. He was really just biding his time to backstab the heroes in both those games. Anyways, it's really Eggman's segment where I started hitting my first walls, specifically this room with the acid floor and dozens of boxes flying all around it. Like, just utterly broke my brain the same way Crazy Gadget did. Of course, it's not as hard or as long, but it was just tough enough to stop me in my tracks for a good while. And every bit of progress after it felt like a hard-earned victory, every new room a cause for celebration. Because the further in I got, the higher the stakes, the more seemingly impossible rooms I'd have to redo, the bigger the cost of failure. Which really started coming to a head in Rouge's segment where, okay, well, this was more just me being a dunce, but I remember getting swept up by the water and sent down to the void more than a few times, failing to understand how to climb the 4 tall pillars, cause you do have to, you know, glide between them rather than climb straight up, and struggling to parse that stopping time also stopped the waterfall from blocking my way, struggling to get down fast enough because I wasn't using the drill dive, struggling to get back out at the end cause you have to really book it. For what's ultimately the shortest and simplest segment of the level, it sure gave me a hard time, probably because it was just deep enough in the level to start making me nervous. Or maybe it's just how off the vibes of this area are. The first 2 sections are just Purple Eternal Engine essentially, which love Purple, big fan of Purple. They look great, no notes, but what the hell is going on with all those machines in the walls in this section? Why is there a giant death pit in the water? Why is the music so much more ominous? Which, fun fact, the music for this part was originally going to play an Eggman segment, but either they ran out of time or just couldn't figure out how to translate Knuckles and Rouge's respective styles to more Kanan's core themes. Thus, the music changes when the scenery changes, and frankly, I think it's better for it. It fits how unnerving this strange cavernous chamber is. And the transition from Rouge to Knuckles really hammers home the overarching sense of teamwork, the slow but steady progress towards one goal, cause yeah, it's the same room, just now flooded top to bottom due to Rouge flipping the switch that drained the coolant from the core, which it cannot possibly be safe for Knuckles to swim in that, but he's too headstrong to really care. And it was here that I hit a hard stop. No, this was just too much. For a small child who had been scarred for life by other water stages like Chemical Plant and Hydrocity, I just could not get through this one. Both because, 1, it's just hard as hell, and 2, just way too terrifying. The music especially. And it was this segment that ultimately got my parents to buy me the official strategy guide, the one that would later send me on a years-long completion quest and only deepen my obsession with what I was already certain was my favorite game ever, and it paid off big time when said guide told me about the air necklace, the holy grail of power-ups. I do not think I've ever completed this stage without it, and I do not think I want to try. It's rough, man. Not like you've done much swimming throughout the rest of the game, so even with the air necklace, some of the movement this segment wants you to do is still really damn challenging. Those timers are tight, man.
Final defense system.
And then, of course, it ends with the main man himself, the Sonic from Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, with yet another vibe shift that really ups the sense of danger and an utterly rockin' final tune to drive home that this is it, the final push of the final stage, the culmination of everyone's efforts. Even the Lost Chow, one I'd otherwise find utterly tasteless given its placement at the very end of the game's longest stage, emphasizes this sense of teamwork. Everyone, except Tails for some reason, playing their part in a log sequence of Mystic Melody pedestals, all to make a single trail of rings appear for Sonic. It's just so fitting for this stage in particular. And brief as Sonic's segment is, every single last part of it had a small child racked with nerves struggling through it. The homing attack chain at the start, the artificial chaos over a death pit that I'm fairly confident is the only time the game actually intends for you to use the otherwise useless magic hands ability. Not that a kid would think of it, and thus gladly died to this pit many times trying to kill it the cooler way. Using the ancient light that tears through the chaos horde, finally coming across the gold beetle at the last possible moment, reaching the final tunnel on my very last life, life, and trusting the game just a bit too much, meeting my end going down the wrong water slide into the void. Game over. Utterly devastating. But I wouldn't give up there, oh no. I'd made it past Green Forest, past Security Hall, past Crazy Gadget, the hardest level in all of video gaming. If I could beat that stage, I could beat anything. One more shot, and this time I did it. I broke through to the game's final set piece and watched as the current Sid Sonic racing towards the goal ring. Stage clear, mission accomplished, the end.
Too easy. Piece of cake.
Except it doesn't end with Sonic.
Leave this one to me.
Shadow, what are you doing?
Because ultimately, despite his name being in the title, despite how goddamn fantastic his levels are, Sonic Adventure 2 was never really a game about Sonic. He spends the entire story failing time and time again. Getting arrested, getting duped by Eggman, hell, even stopping the Eclipse Cannon from firing didn't amount to all that much in the end. And while Eggman himself is the star of the show, Shadow is undoubtedly the game's main character, so it's only right that he end things with his own hands. I feel like the years have not been kind to Shadow's character, boiling him down to little more than ow the edge because, well, that's what a dumb kid is gonna take away from his character, so of course that's what future games leaned into the most. A familiarization that's especially painful because of how compelling a character Shadow was in his first and in a better world only appearance. For one, it was the first time Sonic ever truly met his match. Metal Sonic, nah, no matter how many times that bucket of bolts got back up, Sonic just knocked him right back down again. But the two Hedgehog scuffles both ended in stalemates as far as the story is concerned. Sonic finally finds a problem he can't run from, and Shadow has his pride as the ultimate life form tarnished, which that's really his struggle throughout the entire story, that of identity. Who is Shadow? It's the question the game starts with, and one that Shadow himself grapples with throughout the story, so it's only fitting that his final opponent is essentially himself. Or rather, the monster he could have been, fully consumed by a desire for vengeance had it not been for his inherent humanity. The humanity that led him to choose his promise to Maria over his thirst for revenge. Even if it was humanity itself that carried out her murder, that spawned his desire for revenge in the first place. All because there was one person willing to see the good in him, whether that was Maria herself or, coming in clutch at the last possible moment, Amy goddamn Rose. Even she gets to play her part. And while it's easy to say that Shadow is the quote-unquote villain of the story, given that it's his machinations that ultimately led to such a desperate situation, that's not really true either, is it? For one, all this started when Eggman freed Shadow from stasis, but even then, the Hedgehog was really only ever a pawn in Gerald's plan, who himself was only driven mad by the cruelty of the powers that be, which I guess makes Gun the true villains of Sonic Adventure 2. All cops are bastards, so yeah, so true, besties. But even after Shadow defeats that monster inside him once and for all, it's still not enough. His and Gerald's thirst for revenge has taken on a will of its own, too powerful to be quelled even by its master, even by the ultimate life form himself. So how about 2? As Shadow teams up with his equal and both Hedgehogs ascend to their final form to take down the final hazard for good, all set to the best goddamn butt rock song you've ever heard in your life. And also the best song in the game, hell, the series, all of gaming in general. Frick, man. Even over 20 years down the line, it still gets my blood pumping. It's really all about the spectacle here between the killer tune, the striking visuals as the arc continuously plummets closer and closer towards Earth, and the unstoppable teamwork of Sonic and Shadow showing this monstrosity who the real ultimate life forms are, where every other member of the team is cheering you on the entire time. Even if you fail and have to restart, all that means is more support, more motivation. This is a fight you're destined to win, that Shadow is destined to win, as the game really tries to set it up so that he lands the final blow. Cause ultimately, this is his fight, not Sonic's.
Can you both hear me? Please hurry up!
I must destroy all the evil the Professor has created.
where Shadow's story reaches its end, a story of identity, of grief, of atonement, and ultimately of sacrifice, as he uses the last of his strength to set right what he had once wronged and falls down to earth without a single regret, finally having fulfilled his promise.
Maria, this is what you wanted, right? This is my promise I made to you.
Where is Shadow?
There's something genuinely moving about this last scene. The last scene, as the soundtrack so rightly names it, as the gang eulogizes the fallen hero, one they knew for so little time yet left such a big impact on each and every one of them. Seeing Eggman, like, genuinely shook by his grandfather's actions, like, is that the person he'll become if he continues down this path? How do you even keep being the bad guy after that?
As a child, I looked up to my grandfather because of all the great things he accomplished in his life. He was my hero, and I wanted to be a great scientist like him. But did he really mean to destroy us?
I don't know, but what I do know is we all did it together.
Until Tails breaks the mood with all the elegance of a child at a funeral. Classic Tails. But like, ultimately, he is right. They did all do it together, and they've got to move on, both for their sakes and for Shadow's, to celebrate what they've accomplished rather than mourn what they've lost.
What's the matter, Sonic?
Oh, it's nothing. Come on, let's go home to the planet as cool and blue as me.
And as Sonic pulls himself together, trying to lighten the mood as the music swells to match him, the gang does just that, leaving the arc behind for good. The whole scene is so unlike Sonic. Rather than cool, rather than flashy, it's simple, somber, earnest. And I'm not gonna lie, makes me bawl like a baby every time I watch it. Brings me back to being a child and seeing it for the first time. Unironically, one of my favorite scenes in all of gaming. I don't think I was able to grasp it at the time, but it really feels like the end. Not just of the game, but like Sonic as a whole. There's just a sense of finality that permeates every aspect of the game. The last story, the final stage, the final hazard, the last scene. Stakes that have never been higher. The first time that the entire world was truly in danger of being destroyed, not just conquered. The first time everyone, even the series' main villain, worked together. And the first time a major character was unequivocally killed off for real. It plays out like a series finale, and for all intents and purposes, it could have been. Because there was more than a possibility that Sonic Adventure 2 would be the last Sonic game. The swan song of a failing console that had already been discontinued, a celebration of Sonic's 10th anniversary that also served as a potential bookend to his legacy. For the first time in 10 years, Sonic's future was uncertain, and Sonic Team decided that if he was going out, it would have to be with a bang. With the best goddamn game they'd ever made. Would ever make, if you ask me. And given Sonic's legacy in the years since, I can't help but think maybe it should have been the end. Because, like, time has not been kind to Sonic. It wasn't long after he made the leap to other consoles that his reputation really started to sour, culminating in a disastrous 15th anniversary that even to this day is still used as shorthand for a bad video game. But even before that, retconning Adventure 2 by both undoing Shadow's death and screwing up his backstory in ways that don't make any sense and only serve to muddy the waters of what was meant to be a self-contained, coherent story. But the greatest sacrifice over the years, the biggest victim of Sonic's fall from grace, was the loss of the earnestness that made Sonic so compelling. Cause no matter the game, Sonic had always been synonymous with being cool, with just being himself. A self-assured coolness that didn't need anyone else's approval. Welcoming talking cartoon animals who run fast and rip off Dragon Ball is an inherently goofy premise, but the series put its heart into everything it did and in return captured the hearts of millions of kids who wanted to be just like the Blue Blur. Mario was a brand, Sonic was a character, that's what always made him stand out. But Sonic Team seemed to misdiagnose the problem with Sonic as being that sense of earnestness itself. The Sonic change of the times into an ironic, self-referential, and often self-deprecating series that seemed only to want to constantly remind you of when Sonic was so beloved without ever really understanding why that version of Sonic was so beloved. And yet, the games that started that trend were the ones rewarded with the critical acclaim they'd sought for nearly a decade. Colors and Generations lauded as the return of Sonic, now the template for the series going forward, to increasingly diminishing returns. And thus, Sonic became a brand. No game post-Unleashed has been free of both nostalgia pandering and detached irony journey. You get one or the other at best, and not until the recent releases of Frontiers and Shadow Generations did we finally see at least some attempt to return to that early series earnestness, attempts at deeper stories meant to make you actually feel something. Even if I have my gripes of the gameplay of those games, of all the Boost games really, which I've never found as mechanically deep or engaging as the adventure games, it's a step in the right direction. But like, that's just the thing. That's what Sonic is now to an entire generation. Self-deprecation and holding B to boost. Where over a decade of angry YouTube men have convinced so many people that actually Sonic was never good, and thus the older titles are only ever reevaluated under the eye of criticism. It sucks to see so many people who weren't even there at the time approach something you love with an inherently negative bias, a complete refusal to meet the game on its own terms, especially because it's not really even their fault. The games that came after trained them to think that way by actually genuinely being that bad. I can't get mad at anyone saying Sonic Adventure 2 was never good because, like, yeah, it does have its problems, absolutely. Even beyond the genuinely bad missions and stages, even beyond how much the game's visuals have degraded with each subsequent port, it's a game held together by duct tape and glue. Barely functional even at the best of times, where you have to learn to play around all its rough edges, but like, the kid who played this game at age 10 didn't even see those rough edges because they weren't looking for them. They were playing the coolest goddamn video game they'd ever seen in their life. Who cares if the physics are a bit janky, if the camera's not that great, if the level design is overly punishing, if the dialogue's poorly translated and often incoherent? Cause Sonic is just so cool, man. So like, yeah, maybe Adventure 2 should have been the end of Sonic. Maybe the series should have ended on a high note rather than degrade over time, rather than turn into a parody of itself that anyone who didn't grow up with Sonic at his peak rightly mocks. Better that it stayed a fond memory for those of us who did, something to look back on with nostalgia rather than shame. Maybe Sonic would have been better off for it. But who am I kidding? That's just me being selfish, really. And it was never gonna happen anyways. If there's anything Sonic's good at, it's improvising, surviving, making it through, the good times and the bad. Sonic's arguably bigger now than he's ever been, and I'm not gonna let my pining for days long gone blind me to the reality that ultimately it's all for the best. I'd rather we still be talking about Sonic in 2025, having more kids playing a new Sonic game for the first time, than having the series be forgotten to the sands of time like so many of his contemporaries. Like, condolences to the Blue Bomber, but the Blue Blur's just built different, baby. Ultimately, this entire video has just been a way for me to gush about my feelings towards one of my favorite games rather than a pure ranking exercise. Hell, I sabotaged that from the very start by putting Canon Score at the top of the list before I even began writing the script, just so I had an excuse to rave about the entire ending sequence and unpack my complicated feelings towards the series as a whole. Though, to be clear, I do absolutely adore Canon Score, even for all its faults. Again, any frustration I may have felt during that first time struggling through it has long since evaporated. All that's left are the good memories and the awesome vibes. And if there's any one thing I want you to take from this video, it's to learn to appreciate games for what they are rather than what they aren't. To try and see the good in the media you engage with rather than focusing on everything it does wrong to the detriment of your own enjoyment. To treat older works as a product of their time rather than holding them to modern standards. Everything is eventually going to become dated, and that's fine. Obviously, nobody is going to like every game they play, and there's no game that everyone is going to enjoy either, but viewing everything from a negative perspective is robbing yourself of the joy of meeting a game on its own terms and just, like, having fun with it. You know, fun, that thing that games are supposed to be. I still find Sonic Adventure 2 hella fun, and coming back to it every few years is like comfort food to me. It'll always be one of my favorite games, even if it's not technically the best, just because of the relationship I have with it, and regardless of how time treats the game or the series, that's something that nobody can take away from me. So, sayonara, Sonic the Hedgehog, and a good night to you all.